The time is now 6 p.m. Our regular city council meeting for August 20th, 2024 is now in session. First on the agenda is Councilmember Brown will lead us with the opening prayer and the pledges of allegiance to the flags of the United States and the state of Texas. Please rise.
Good evening. Let's pray. Thank you, Lord, for the gift that is Schertz, and guide us towards a solid future as we discuss our budget, taxes, and other worldly issues. Help us maintain our focus here for the good of all the citizens, both now and in the future. Protect our staff and first responders as they work to keep us healthy and safe, and keep our community in good spirits as we deal with the difficulties of daily life on earth. In your name we pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you, Councilmember Brown. All right, we'll move on. City announcements, announcements of upcoming events. Mr. James.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, everybody's excited. Coming up on August 23rd and 24th, that's, I believe, Friday and Saturday, we have the library bag sale, which is from the Read Before Bookstore sale. That's 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. at Schertz Library here at 7098 Schertz Parkway. And for $5, you can fill a bag with books. It's yours for $5. It's a lot of books you can cram into a bag. Next council meeting, September 3rd, 6 p.m. here at Council Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. James. Announcements and recognitions by our city manager, Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. We had several promotions this month. We had Christopher Meek was promoted to fire captain. Nicole Sosa Sterling moved to police officer, from recruit to police officer. Aiden Martin was promoted to paramedic. Catherine Myers promoted to police officer from recruit. Carl Schulte is a battalion chief. Zachary Lowry, Jason Timrak, and Justin Schwarzinski all promoted to fire lieutenant. Zachary Jewett went to fire apparatus operator. Donald Shabinsky, fire apparatus operator. Kevin Hose, fire apparatus operator, and Eric Herzog, fire apparatus operator. Also, we had John Perry, who promoted into the assistant chief position. And lastly, Matthew Garcia is promoted to fire apparatus operator. Excuse me, tongue twister there. Really proud of all those folks moving up within our organization and taking on a bigger role and more responsibility and doing a great job doing it. Also, I want to say, we celebrated National Purple Heart Day on the 7th of August, and for the sacrifice and courage for our folks that were wounded. And Police Alumni Association, want to give them thanks for volunteering their time and their efforts at the start of the school year, helping us at the crossway at Pecan Drive, making sure that our students get safely across the street there. And that is it, Mayor. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Announcements and recognitions by the mayor. I just want to say congratulations to our city staff on your promotions. Well deserved. We'll move on. Next on the agenda is the hearing the residents. This time is set aside for any person who wishes to address the city council. Each person is limited to 3 minutes, and we ask before addressing the council, for the record, please state your name and address. Now, we do have the hearing the residents where you can sign in, and we also have the public hearing. I think we have one person that signed up. You can speak at both if you like to. The choice is yours. Mayor Pro Tem, please call our first speaker.
Jesse Ward.
Good evening. How are y'all today? I came to talk to the City Council about...
Excuse me, I hate to interrupt you.
I'm sorry, Jesse Ward, 500 Brooks Avenue.
Thank you, sir.
I came to talk about the traffic enforcement or the traffic law enforcement in our city. I've been a meager resident of this area since, well, the last 61 years. and I've never seen traffic as atrocious as it is right now. In the last week, I've been passed by people driving down Arrow when I was driving 20 miles an hour in excess of 30 miles over the speed limit. In addition to that, if you look at the map of where my residence is, I live on the corner of Lindbergh, which appears to be the new San Antonio Raceway. In addition to that, I have five family members that own properties in the city, one of which works off of Main Street. He feels like every time he pulls out on Main Street, it is he's taking his life into his own hands between the cars blocking the view and the speeds of people driving down the streets. And evidently, I don't know if y'all were aware, but it appears the speed limit on Schertz Parkway is somewhere between 45 and 50. So I would like for y'all, as you go through the budget this evening, to please consider adding some additional focus and attention on our police department. I fully support them and appreciate them, but I feel like we need to expand the police force a little bit better to do more health and safety and protection of residents.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you for your time.
We'll move on. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda items. These are considered self-explanatory, and information packets are provided to council and available for public viewing. These items require no separate discussion unless requested by council. Item number 1, minutes. Item number 2, appointments, reappointments, and resignations of boards and committees. Item number 3, resolution number 24R83. Council, do any of these need to be removed for separate action? Is there a motion to approve consent agenda items 1, 2, and 3?
So move.
Second.
I have a motion made by Councilmember Watson and second by Councilmember Hayward. Any comments? If none, please cast your vote. We can publish the vote, please. We have 7 ayes, no objections. Motion passes. We'll move on to discussion items and action items. Right. Item number 4, resolution number 24R87, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing the purchase of an ambulance remount. Mr. Mamet, floor is yours.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We still are seeing long delays with new ambulance purchases. Right now, they're about 15 months out from the time we order to delivery. So we are seeking approval for a remount for next year. That's when we take an existing ambulance, take the box off, and put it on a brand new chassis. There is some cost savings and, of course, some time savings as well. Happy to answer any questions.
All right, Council, floor is open for discussion. Councilmember Watson.
I motion that we approve Resolution 24R87.
Second.
I have a motion made by Councilmember Watson, second by Councilmember Gibson. Council, any comments? None. If you can please cast your vote. We can publish the vote, please. We have 7 ayes, no objections. Motion passes. All right, we'll move on to item number 5. Resolution number 24R97, authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Sigma Healthcare, Delta Dental, Community Eye Care, the Hartford, Cementra, and Deer Oaks for insurance coverage and employee assistance program services. Floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I am here tonight with a proposal for the employee insurance for plan year 2025. If you'll recall, and first of all, let me preface this by saying I put together a very short presentation, all of which the information has already been distributed to y'all and is included in your packet. If you'll recall, we spoke about it briefly at the budget retreat a couple of weeks ago. Since 2019, we have had Blue Cross Blue Shield for medical and Unum for dental and vision. Unfortunately, in the last couple of years, the premium increases has just become unsustainable, and so we did issue an RFP in April for all lines of coverage. You can see here, medical, dental, vision, disability, life, accident, critical illness, hospital indemnity, as well as our employee assistant program services. We had an overwhelming response. 55 proposals were received in total. We did request in the solicitation that they submit proposals that match our current plan designs, and so the recommendations tonight are based on no changes to the current employee plan design changes for any of the lines of coverages. And in some cases, we'll actually see enhanced benefits. After the initial evaluations, we did narrow it down to the most competitive vendors for each line, and we invited them to submit a best and final offer, after which we conducted carrier interviews. And so our recommendations are set forth laid out in front of you. We recommend switching from Blue Cross to Cigna Healthcare for medical, switching from Unum to Delta Dental for dental, switching to Community Eye Care for vision, for disability and life, switching from Unum to the Hartford, and then for the ancillary lines of coverage, including accident, critical illness, and hospital indemnity, switching to Symetra. Lastly, we recommend switching our employee assistance program from our current vendor, Alliance Workforce Partners, to Deer Oaks. So a quick summary of the benefits that these recommendations are going to bring to the city. By switching to Cigna for medical, we will realize a savings of approximately $681,462. We will be able to maintain the exact same plan coverage for our employees at that 11% decrease in cost. Additionally, they have provided a 2026 rate guarantee of a not-to-exceed cap of 9.5%. By partnering with Delta Dental, we will see enhanced plan coverage. They actually are offering a little bit more than our previous carriers did. Savings there of 9% annually, or $26,000 approximately. A 2-year rate lock with a 3rd-year rate guarantee of no more than 6.5% increase. They're also offering some allowance to cover any costs that we might incur in switching carriers. Community Eye Care, by partnering with them, again, we're going to see enhanced plan coverage. Approximately 20% savings for just shy of $10,000 annually. A 5-year rate lock. Also, they are offering some implementation credit as well. The Hartford for disability and life, again, enhanced plan coverage. We're going to see approximately 30% savings. That's going to yield about $37,000 between long-term and life, as well as a 3-year rate lock. Symetra, these are for the ancillary lines that I mentioned, accident, critical illness, and hospital indemnity. They are all employee paid, so 100% employee paid, but we were able to secure lower rates for the employees, as well as a 3-year rate lock for those. And then Deer Oaks, we're going to be able to continue to provide a comprehensive EAP program for our employees, and we received a 2-year rate lock. A quick cost summary. The big number is really down at the bottom. By saving, and based on the recommendations that you have before you tonight, we will be saving the city approximately $750,000 annually. As I mentioned, this was obviously a huge win. We were able to maintain all of our current plan design, so again, no reduction in benefits to employees. Next steps, obviously we're asking for your approval here tonight. After that time, we'll work with the broker, our benefits broker, with the carriers and ADP on implementation for calendar year beginning 1/1/25. We anticipate, or we'll plan to have employee benefit workshops with this much change occurring in 1 year. Obviously, we want to have face-to-face meetings with employees so we can educate them on all of the new plans, what their offerings will look like, and then following that, we'll have open enrollment. We have that scheduled for late October. And then finally, again, I think we previously mentioned, but I wanted to say it again, in this coming year, it is our plan to review our current insurance plan designs in an effort to develop a long-term and really sustainable strategy for managing rising healthcare costs. We do have pretty generous plan designs currently, and so we want to look at trying to develop some strategies how we can maintain benefits, but again, manage those rising healthcare costs. So that's something that will certainly be on the docket for discussion in the coming year. With that, I'm happy to take any comments or questions that you may have.
All right, thank you. All right, council, floor is open for discussion. Councilmember Gibson.
Hey there. I just want to make sure that I'm fully, that I read it correctly. And I understand that it's going to be a better cost for the city, but I just want to make sure that it's not going to rise up the cost of co-pays and things like that for our employees. We did, of course, check those things out. I do see a couple red items in your packet that said that there's just a few rising costs in particular areas. Did we weigh that as a risk that we were willing to take when we decided on this plan?
So Cigna actually matched our plan design dollar for dollar. So if you look at the Cigna, there's no increase in any co-pays, co-insurance, deductibles, max out-of-pocket, anything like that. United Healthcare, which was included in the summary that was provided to you, did have some slight differences, some slight variations in some of their pricing. But again, with Cigna, the recommended vendor here, it's dollar for dollar matched what we currently have for employees.
Perfect. I apologize. I did scroll up too fast without reading that header. All right, thank you.
No problem.
I would like to, can I make a motion?
Yes.
I would like to make a motion to approve Resolution 24R97.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made by Councilmember Gibson, second by Councilmember Watson. Council, any other comments? If none, please cast your vote. We can publish the vote, please. We have 7 yeas, no objections, motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, we'll move on to item number 6, resolution number 24R95, authorizing subdivision improvement agreements for Saddlebrook Development. Mr. James, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. Brian James, Deputy City Manager for the City of Schertz. The item before you, the applicant is requesting, or the developer is requesting, to be able to enter into subdivision improvement agreements to essentially be able to file 4 phases of their development before the acceptance, all the acceptance of public improvements. You may recall that council approved a subdivision improvement agreement for 2 phases, I think 1A and 1B. One of those phases was actually the lift station, so no residential lots, but there was the phase with the residential lots. A little bit of history on this. It's been quite a few years when I looked back to see when we talked to council, probably 8 to 10 years ago, where we had a workshop with council about subdivision improvement agreements. And the direction at the time was, we're okay doing it for commercial projects, right? But we don't want to do it for single-family residential projects. And it's sort of for a couple reasons, and again, let me explain fairly briefly. So if you have a commercial building, say a gas station, convenience store, often what they want to do is, as part of platting that, they may need to build a section of water line or a section of street. And what they'd like to do is file the plat, mobilize a contractor once to be able to put in that street and water line while they start construction on their site. And they understand that until certain things are in place, the development of that site may stop, right? So they can't typically go vertical on the building until they get fire access drives in, or maybe have a fire hydrant that works. But sewer, for example, you really don't need it till further down. They can build essentially the building, and so it lets them be more efficient with it. One of the reasons I think staff was okay with that is that when they get to the point and say, hey, we're still hung up, all our public infrastructure is not in, let us get a CO, and typically we hang up the certificate of occupancy, it's frankly a little bit easier to tell this business, no, you didn't meet your obligation under the agreement, we're not going to give you your CO, or we can look at a temporary CO or something like that. There's a way around it. Residential staff is found to be much more problematic, right? Because you'll have people wanting to buy that house, wanting to move in that house. And again, I'm not saying this happens with everybody, but often maybe the person working in the sales office, when they're telling them it's the city's sort of fault. They don't explain, well, we didn't get this built and it hasn't been accepted in this, that, and the other. And I would say that too, from a staff perspective, the subdivision improvement agreements for single-family residential tend to be a bit more complicated. There tends to be a bit more that we're looking at than we typically do on a commercial site. But all that to say, they can be done. Now again, a couple things with this. When we do these agreements, what we require is a surety to be put up, right? Essentially the cost of the improvement plus 20%. so that if the developer fails to put it in and the property plat has been filed, the city can go in and finish those public improvements. We can call in the surety and we can put the infrastructure in. Again, if we have to do that, it's a little easier dealing with a commercial building that's trying to be in or occupied than it is a subdivision and people who have bought residential lots. Again, it can be done. And so some of the risk you run is that costs have gone up, the surety doesn't cover it, there's kind of an issue there. But we haven't had that happen, right? We've not called in one of these in the 12, 13 years I've been here. So I don't want to scare you too much, but I do want to say there is a little bit of risk. The other problem is it's just the time it takes to manage these agreements, right? We probably have, I'd estimate, 20 active agreements that we're managing now. Just to be blunt, I think what staff is saying, if you're okay doing it here for Saddlebrook, this is a policy question. And what staff would say is, we're going to get asked by the next guy and the next guy and the next guy. So again, what we would suggest is, and we can do this over a period of time, give policy direction that we're willing to allow these. Staff can come back and work with you on the framework those agreements would take. We'd recommend that you amend the code to allow staff to approve those agreements, so we're not having to come to you for approval of every one of them. It just saves us time. We're not working on staff reports. We're able to kind of manage the agreements a little bit better. So that's a little bit of a background and a history. So the direction in the past for those reasons was not to do them on single-family residential subdivisions. But again, as I said, you can kind of mitigate for some of those risks. I think staff has a concern that if we do this here, we're going to get everybody coming in and asking for them. And if you're going to do it here, you probably ought to do it for everybody. And I just would not underappreciate the amount of residential subdivisions those are and the complexity that those tend to take on. But again, it's doable. It's about how much you want to be development friendly, again, how that workload plays out, things like that. The other thing, interestingly, that the developer is asking in this case with it, and so we're going to bring it up, it's with the prior phases, to be able to start some model homes, even though that infrastructure isn't entirely in. And in this case, it's really the sewer lift station. Much like the city is struggling to get our sewer lift station on Woman Hollering Creek up, they're struggling to get their sewer lift station up as well. And I think there are a few other things outstanding, relatively minor. But what they've indicated is we fully understand, let us get started on this. So the way we think the timing will work, we'll have a head start. We can start marketing these. We have buyers coming in on the spec portion, we can do it. We fully get that we can't transfer ownership. One of the things we have in the agreement is we can't transfer ownership other than, again, the reason they're doing this is kind of an entity that's funding the project and contractual obligations, but we won't start selling them to individuals. And so again, all of that is sort of doable. It just comes with time needing to manage, and it comes with some risk. Because again, not to demean, it's a little bit like those with kids. If you give a mouse a cookie, the book, right? So inherently it's, well, yeah, I know this, can I get this? And I think that's natural. I'm not demeaning, I'm not mocking it. It's sort of the natural thing. So again, even in this case where they said, yeah, hey, we just need to file the plat, now it's kind of come back and going, yeah, hey, but we can get like 5 building permits off of it. There is a little bit of that. And so if you want to do it, and if you want to set that policy, I think what staff would want to do is really try to set the parameters of that, right? Come up with a template agreement for single family residential that if you're going to do it, it's this, it's only this, because part of the complexity and challenge on this is if I'm managing 20 agreements and they're all different, it's harder to do as opposed to you're just going to say, look, this is our standard agreement, take it or leave it. We know they're all alike, it's easier to monitor, it's easier to track, things like that. So that's a little bit of the background. The developer's representative is here tonight. Again, staff is not recommending approval of this based on that past direction, and because this does create some challenges, but you'll notice we're not recommending denial of it based on council having done this previously and kind of some of the discussions we've heard from council. So with that, I'll stop talking and answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. James. Councilmember Brown.
I can see doing this if it was a development that we saw a drastic need to get going, to move forward with an area, but we don't have any of that right now. I mean, we have a lot of development happening, but we don't have anything that's a crucial development need in any particular area. So I kind of tend to, let's stick with what we have. We know it works, and we're not overburdening the staff, so we can continue with a planned and organized process.
Yeah, and I will, just because I said I would do this, I think from the developer's perspective, they're under kind of an obligation between the entity that's kind of funded the thing whose name it's in to transfer the lots to the builder by a certain time, and then the other is a little bit of a tack on, but fair enough.
Mr. James, is
Yes,
the
sir.
biggest obstacle is the lift station?
That's the biggest, the biggest issue that they've got is the lift station. There are a few other things that will remind them. It's not just the lift station, it's a few of these other things, but they are relatively minor, right? I mean, again, if I looked up the email and said it's this and this, they'd probably have somebody, they'd probably say, we'll get somebody out there tonight. And I'm like, well, you can't work after a certain time, so have them come out in the morning. And they could probably knock them out in fairly short order this week, for example.
Is there an estimated time when the project will be completed for this lift station?
So they tell me that it's going to be done within a couple of months, and I don't doubt that. That's likely sort of the thing. And again, the only thing on this is, again, as we found with our lift station, they may go, well, that's the city, it's not us. We put in the pump didn't work, had to take the pump out, can't figure out what's wrong with the pump, had to ship the pump back to wherever it is, and the pump's sitting there, we're trying to figure out what's wrong with the pump. So they have an estimate, but again, I think, and I will say their credit, they're running into what we're running into. It's really hard. There's still a lot of supply chain issues on some of this stuff that's hanging it up. But yeah, it is in this case, it's fair to say it's the lift station that's the issue. And so, again, if you're willing to do it, I'd make very clear, do not even come back at all and be asking to occupy any of these buildings on a temporary basis or anything like that, because we're having none of it, right? If you can't get it done, then you're just going to sit there with some partially built buildings.
Councilmember Hayward.
I guess right now I'm a little, confused because you're saying you're not saying, so staff is saying not recommended, but then you say, but you're not asking for denial. So are we trying to help the developer get something done because of the whole transfer thing and you're thinking we should do that or not?
So staff recommended denial of the prior subdivision improvement agreement based on the council direction. And council said, thanks staff, we're recommending approval of it, right?
Right.
So from a staff perspective, there's been a shift in policy. So again, I think staff watches what council does. We watch the things you say. In light of the fact that when staff came and recommended denial, council said, no, we're good with it, let's do it. Staff is not coming back and tilting at windmills so that at some point somebody on council says, why does staff not get that we're okay with it? They keep recommending denial and we keep recommending approval, right? So that's why you have the softer, but I think what staff wanted to do in this case is say, if you're inclined to approve it here, then frankly what we would say is it seems like there's been a policy shift. And not that you have to open it up to everybody, but then let's revisit the policy and practice so that frankly when staff sits down with the developer who says, hey, let's talk about timing, staff knows to say, council is open or we are open to doing these subdivision improvement agreements or we're not, so that the developers have good information going forward. So yeah, the reason you're getting what you're getting from staff is because, this isn't meant in a negative way, council approved the last one over objection.
Mm-hmm.
There doesn't seem to be anything different here than you approved before, but we just want you to understand the implications. Again, I want to be clear. It's not like we're going to fall apart because of the workload tomorrow just because of this thing, right? It's not that. There is just a work component and a management component. Again, ironically, I was laughing with the developer's rep that on another agreement they have to call us sort of every year and remind us, hey, remember you're supposed to pay us this money for this thing, which we appreciate just as we try to keep up with it. Does that help?
Yeah, so basically we're here because council a few years ago approved Saddlebrook
No, a few months ago.
a few months ago.
Sorry.
It was Carmel, I think, wasn't it?
Was it Carmel
you
Ranch
did
that I'm
a different
thinking about?
agreement. So, no, what you did with Carmel is Carmel, you approved a pump and haul agreement because they are waiting on the Saddlebrook
Saddlebrook.
lift station.
Okay.
But they had to have everything else in other than Saddlebrook's lift station to do the pump and haul. And so their plat, in fact, got filed today, and the agreement, pump and haul agreement got filed. That was what you did on that one. It was sort of this, but a little bit different. What you did with Saddlebrook is they essentially were here going, hey, look, I really need to contractually get these lots on the ground. can you approve? Staff recommended denial, council said okay to it. You've done a couple more. You've done a couple for Crossvine and you've done a couple for Homestead. Those were, again, really unusual situations with sort of phases as part of a long-term development where we had other stuff kind of hanging out there with some unusual issues they were having that didn't create the same kind of problems potentially as you would get with these. And again, I want to be clear, if you want to do them, there are all sorts of ways you could limit them, right? We're not going to do them on the front end to let you file before anything's in the ground. We'll only let you do them if you're lacking one element, for example, or something like that.
Councilmember Davis.
So does this all come down to a continued problem with logistics?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Is this a logistics issue that we're still, I mean, they're having a hard time getting parts? Is it a timing thing for their project that something's holding them up and they want to continue on?
Yeah, I think what you've got here is probably fair to say it's a logistics issue, right? It was the slow lead time on a number of elements that we're seeing slow lead times sort of across the board. And so this isn't one where I would say, oh, the developer has just not been on top of it, they've kind of lagged, they've done whatever. There have been some things that the city has dealt with and experienced, and others we deal with have dealt with and experienced that have created this. What they've indicated to us is they have a particular contractual obligation to have the plats filed by a deadline that creates an issue for them. Their agreements in particular stipulate that they cannot convey ownership of those lots beyond this first transfer. So they can't sell lots to the home buyer even with the plat filed on these agreements. And so does that help?
Yeah, I mean, I can see your point. I'd hate to open up Pandora's box on this and change a policy or guidance for the staff that now is going to snowball down the path. But again, if this is something that is still the end stages of our previous logistics problems that we've had, and we've seen this in a lot of different areas out there. I mean, to me, this is not making the rule. This is allowing an exception to the rule because of a unique circumstance.
And let me be clear, I think fair enough, and that is, I think, what staff is looking to get out of this. So again, don't have to decide that all tonight. What council could do is say, we're going to approve this, but we're not opening it up to everybody. Staff come back in a month or so, and let's kind of cover the circumstances we would do it, a logistics issue that we're on the tail end of where you have one or two outstanding items, right? Not a front end before anything's built. Perfectly fine to do that. But we would say, let's come back and do that with you so we set those parameters. So when we start talking to people, we're clear on this is what the expectation is.
I certainly don't have a problem with that. I mean, because even on our other projects, Main Street, we're seeing issues with
it's a GVC issue. With
transformers
the lead time.
and everything else. And, I just can't see in good faith that we're telling someone if you have other agreements that you have to work with, that everything has to now stop because of a logistic problem that is maybe beyond their control.
Understood.
Councilmember Macaluso.
So when you say increased risk, is one of those risks the starting of a development and potentially some of the structures beginning and then it not being completed, and now we have these vacant buildings that can't be completed until a whole new developer comes in and completes the project? Is that
Yeah, I mean, what you could have, and again, coupled with the restriction on their ability to sell the lots, right? Because that's what the agreement does. It lets them make this one transfer, but they can't sell them to home buyers. That one of the risks is we're all standing out there, we're looking at this house that's pretty much complete, other than the plumbing's been connected because there's no sewer yet. And they're going, but we'd like to have the realtor move in. They can use the bathroom in the construction trailer. We'd like to have customers come in and look at it. That's what you run into with the element of allowing the building permits. But again, it's not opening it up to everybody. It's limited to be clear. So for example, make very clear you're not getting a CO, nobody's going in there, there's no temp COs until everything is accepted with the subdivision. Don't even kind of bother to ask kind of thing. We'll give you this lead time that lets you pick up, 3, 4, 5 months, whatever. But don't be calling staff, hounding them to let you do it, or asking them to come back to council, because we're not going to do that. But again, if council had gone this different policy direction, is I'm okay doing it like we do commercial, which is let them file the plat on the front end, don't have restrictions on the ability to sell the lot, right? Don't have a limitation on pulling a building permit, just limit to having the utility connections. That's where you get much more significant issues, right? Because they've sold the lot to somebody, they put it under contract, you've got a homeowner who's designed their house with all the features that they want, and they're screaming because it can't keep moving forward.
But then does that present a situation where the homeowner goes in on this house, so then instead of them believing that they might be in 6 months, it might end up being 2 years down the road because some other problem comes in place?
Yes. I mean, that's what you run into. Again, I will say we have this problem occasionally, and it's not as much anymore because and I think frankly, we've had a lot of inspection staff, and that's really helped us. But we used to have this problem where we would have literally a resident wanting to move in a house. The house hadn't been finished. So it's not the subdivision, but the house isn't done. And we're standing there going, I can't give you a CO because it's not done. And they got the moving truck sitting there trying to move in, right? It's that sort of a thing, but a bit different. So again, you could limit that with when you do these and when you don't.
Our current process, it limits that possibility, though.
Our current process, what the ordinance says standard, if you don't do an agreement, we don't run any risk of that happening because they can't file the plat till all of the infrastructure is in place, which would allow a building permit to be issued and a CO to be granted, assuming the building is complete. There's no risk whatsoever. But again, we accept a certain amount of risk in life and things like this.
Yeah, I mean, just for that reason, I would not be supportive of changing it for the residential plats, but just because I mean, obviously, the risk might not be as high as what it might seem, but it is still a risk, and I think that kind of leads us down a bad slope, especially if we get a developer in that doesn't have a lot of experience or something along I could just see that causing an issue with homes being started and the project not being able to be completed.
Yeah, and again, I will say what we've done, because again, staff's not supportive of it, I'm not pounding up here telling you this is a horrible thing, don't do this, is that limitation on being able to sell the house sort of helps with that thing with the temporary, right? If you didn't have that, then yeah, they got them under contract, somebody's bought a lot, it's a bigger mess. But understood, we're not going to approve all of it.
Councilmember Hayward.
So based on what you just said, it's about logistics, and that the staff could put something in that would keep the sale of the house happening if we changed it and you brought something back to open it up because we approved this, and because we approved it, they're having some issues with logistics. And so you're not pounding saying, don't do it. You're saying, let you come back with a plan and kind of do this one exception, one off, and then look at if we want to do this going forward?
Yeah, so I think what staff, our view is council has moved off of your past policy position that many of you weren't aware even probably existed, fair enough, when you approved the agreements for Saddlebrook previously. And so staff has sensed that to be a policy shift, right? And so when we saw that, let's not keep trying to, bang our head against a brick wall, not against a brick wall, but there seems to be this shift. Let's walk council through it. Let's try to understand that shift. What I understand from the conversation is we're open to doing it when a logistical or supply chain issue or some unusual factor creates an unanticipated problem toward the end of the process, and we put restrictions in that they can't transfer ownership of the lot other than if there's a requirement to transfer sort of to a large entity, right, the home builder. And that, what I gather is, we're okay letting them get started on a few lots as models, whatnot, but make very clear, no CO till you get everything done and in. And that staff, you frame that up, write that up as our new kind of direction, come back to us, we'll say, yep, that's good. And then again, if we get 2-3 years down the road, we're not having those same supply chain issues, we may shift back to the old policy and go, don't even bother asking for it on res stuff. That's how staff understands it, is generally where council is for the most part, other than concerns, why open that up a little bit from some because of those issues.
Councilmember Brown.
Yeah, I think you just said it clearly there. It's a variance for all intents and purposes. So,
Right.
yeah. So if this is a one-time deal, that's fine, but it's not a true policy shift.
Yeah, let me just offer this. Likely, we'll try to come back in fairly short order because I think I have it. I would bet you'll see a few of these, a couple more this calendar year, right? Not everybody, because often what we get is let us file the plat right before we start pushing dirt, and we're not doing that.
No, from what I'm looking at here is, I understand the developer's situation here because of the supply issues, and we experienced them several times. I mean, look at Live Oak. It took almost 6 months to finish that. And on Carmel, if I'm not mistaken, we limited to 5 houses so they can have their model homes. I don't think we opened Carmel for all pump and haul.
You did.
We
You
did?
did, well, let me be clear. You didn't open all of Carmel to pump and haul, but you didn't limit it to 5, right? There's not a limitation on Carmel being able to sell lots to future home buyers. So yeah, potentially if this thing drags out with the lift station, you could have people living in homes at Carmel with a truck coming in, doing the pump, hauling
At
it
their
off.
expense.
At their expense,
At their
right.
expense.
I think it's
Okay.
40 lots or something, 60 lots, something like that.
You know, and, you know, we're looking at an issue that, you know, this whole vaccine thing, this whole COVID has really put a strain on the supply lines. And I certainly understand the developer and all the different logistic issues that surface, not only with materials, but manpower and everything else that deals with it. So I understand the issue here, and I think, well, this council has to decide, you know, what are we going to do in this situation? Because each subdivision is going to have their own challenges. Each one is going to have their own challenges. But what we're trying to do here is try to give you direction that every time these challenges occur, you have more or less a sense of which way to lean.
Right, and I think
to help the
that's why staff's
developer.
coming up and asking, and why we're not recommending denial again, and why we're not just recommending approval, is there implications, and we're trying to understand that, yeah. I
You
mean, I think-
communicate with the developer as, you know, how this council feels on
Yes,
that
I would just
particular issue.
caution council, every developer has a reason that's not their fault why stuff's not done. How many calls on re-veg have you guys received from people over the years is a good example. But I don't know if Sam is here or somewhere. Like, how many you did the spreadsheet, how many do we have kicking out there? Just general, of different types, we got probably. Yeah, 5, 6, 7, but 20 or so total open. So again, we got a spreadsheet, we manage them, everybody's a little bit different, remember the dates, when's the surety, deadline happen. Again, not the end of the world, it's just, it comes with work, but that's part of work, you gotta work.
Well, Councilmember Davis?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with this. I mean, we're talking about a logistic issue for the lift station. For Carmel, we approved a pump and haul because of a logistic issue. They can't tie into the regular service yet. I mean, the reality of it is for Saddlebrook, they already have the checks and balances of saying that, we're going to do the plat, we're going to have a builder build on that lot, but we're not going to get a CO, we're not going to let them sell it to somebody, let someone move in.
Right.
The reality of it is, if something changes and there's still a logistic issue, could they not also consider a pump and haul agreement?
They
They
could.
could.
Likely, they would come in and ask for a pump and haul agreement, yes, and you'd have us up here again going, now we want to pump, and it's, again, give them us a cookie.
Yeah, I get that, but I mean, you know, to me, it's not, the staff has not come in and said, well, the developer doesn't want to do this, and the developer does not want to build the development to the standards that we expect in our community. You're telling us that there's time issues here, there's logistic issues. And again, we've seen that in so many other areas. So to me, the option is either we look at a variance so that this developer can press on and we can move this can down the road, or we say, no, let's just stop everything. And I think that's not the right vision to take for the city, because otherwise, you know, we'll put brakes on darn near everything.
Yeah, understood. And again, that's, I think, why staff didn't come with the denial, because of what council had done before. Again, what staff was also trying to understand, and it sounds like you're not willing to go that far, is to essentially allow subdivision improvement agreements for single-family res, like we do commercial.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve 24R95.
Second.
Have a motion made by Councilmember Davis, second by Councilmember Gibson. Any other comments? Council, please cast your vote. We can publish the vote, please. We have 6 ayes, 1 objection. Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. James.
You're welcome. I get to stay up here too now.
All right, we move on to item number 7, resolution number 24R96, authorizing a 10th amendment to the interlocal agreement with the Alamo Area Council of Government, ACOG, to provide funding for the transit services in the city of Schertz. Mr. James, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. So for about the last 10 years, we have entered into these interlocal agreements with the Alamo Area Council of Governments to provide generally on-call on demand and then a deviated fixed route for residents in our community, right? And so this is essentially somebody who can't drive, needs a ride to work, needs a ride shopping, needs a ride to a doctor's appointment. It's a low-cost way for them to call up, and again, based on various factors, dictates what they pay. They can get that ride. As we've talked about before, it's not an inexpensive program. Okay, it's fairly expensive to ride because, again, often the folks here, you know, if they had another means to get there, they would use the other means to get there. So maybe they have limited mobility, maybe they need help getting in and out of the vehicle, you know, limited financial resources, et cetera, to sort of run the program. And again, the costs for this, when we've looked at other cities, are in line with that. When we started out with the program, I think back in 11 years ago, our match money was $22,500. It went up 2015, I think, to $29,000. It came down slightly. We hit COVID, which was sort of a whole weird time frame. And in 2019, it went up to what it is, which is $42,666, and it's stayed there. This year, the numbers in terms of rides has gone down for Schertz to the point that I think staff is saying, in light of that, and in light of what some other communities are doing, we probably ought to start taking a deeper look at other alternatives that are out there. To be clear, we're not saying not approve it. We are recommending approval of this, in part because, and again, this is just sometimes it takes ACOG a while to get this stuff to us. This agreement is for the current fiscal year we're in, that we're 3/4 of the way through, that they're counting on the funding and they're counting on the match from VIA on. They provided the service in good faith. Staff had reminded them kind of to provide it, so it's not as though we've been lax at it, but I understand some of their challenges. So we're recommending approval of this. What we would do is generally come back to you, but we'd like to we've told ACOG, look, you need to have us the stats for this fiscal year before the end of October, because we want to take that next agreement, which is the year you'll be in, right at the beginning of the year. The cost should stay the same, and we're going to spend about 6 months looking at alternatives and give you an early enough heads up of whether we want to stay in this program in this form, whether we want to work with you on some different forms of it, right? There's micro rides are out there. We've had some of the cities around us in terms of Kyle and I think San Marcos have experimented with sort of Uber credit things where people can call up Uber and they fund part of the cost of that ride for their city's residents, which is, again, maybe a way to do it. The example I use is, my mother, who's 81, she's not watching, could not manage to kind of call an Uber on her own. She could do this program, though, right? She can pick up her landline and she can dial and talk to someone and tell them where she needs to be and then plan for them to be there and take her to the doctor and back. And so it fits a role. But I think in light of that, what we're recommending is that you approve this tonight. We've already told ACOG we want to come back to council in early November with the next fiscal year we're rolling to, and then staff is going to spend time probably with TSAC really digging into what other communities are doing, how they supplement, things like that, and then give you plenty of notice what our direction is going to be the following year in light of that. Because we don't have anything to fill the gap right now. We'd have people without service. We may look at it and say for the portion of the community that we're serving, this really is the best way to go. Again, some issues have come up with what everybody pays on this. I think staff has had conversations about that. And again, be careful what you wish for. We need to really look at how the overall program is funded. Now, in part what that is because New Braunfels, that was part of our urbanized service area, has gone into their own. So this big pot of money that we had to serve a number of communities, that pot size has shifted and changed. And frankly, they haven't gone up on our cost on 5 years, which, costs have kind of gone up. We can look at efficiencies and things like that. And we think that when they come back, and do that look, it's understand how that program is going to be funded, who funds what and what. But again, essentially the way it works is they take our money, our 42, that allows them to get match money from VIA in that same amount to throw in, and then again, in cost of this service that serves kind of this area, ACOG kicks in some as well. But again, much like our EMS service, there's probably something to be said for, we really need to look at how we apportion those costs to communities in the area based on population or based on rides, so that it's fair going forward. So long-winded, we're recommending approval of this. We've already told ACOG, need the stats quick. We'll come back in November, recommend approval of that. But that then we're going to spend a few months deciding what we do to be able to give you notice of direction. But at this point, again, we don't have a different program to fill this. And we haven't necessarily, we've not found any community that has found, here's the one solution to meet everybody needs, and it's really expensive. And certainly if you look at what other communities are doing, there's some that are paying a whole lot more for sort of service. So there's something to be said for some economies of scale, as opposed to we're kind of out by ourselves having to fund the full cost.
Councilmember Gibson.
I would like to make a motion to approve Resolution 24-R-96.
Second.
That was kind of quick without providing any council any opportunity to ask any questions. If I could just take a moment to ask a couple of questions here. You said our total is 42,666, and we only had 1973 rides. We're looking at $25 a trip that we're paying for.
That's at the city's cost. Again, when you factor in the VIA match and you factor in what ACOG kicks in, the cost per ride is up over $80.
$80 a trip, exactly. Now, in this situation, because the services have been provided, I think Councilmember Gibson is right. We should go ahead and approve this resolution because the services have been provided. But I think it is important that we look at alternatives so that we can.
And let me be clear, I misspoke. The cost on a monthly basis per trip ranges from, looks like it's about $45 up to $65, depending on how many trips there are.
That's only one way.
That's the one way, yeah. Yeah, it's an expensive program. We agree, and it always has been. And so again, we want to look at what other options are out there.
But currently, we don't have any. this is all we have. So that's why I'm
There's
recommending approval.
alternatives. I
But
think
there
that.
are.
There are some alternatives. I think one of the things that staff would say is, because we fairly recently got the data, which is what we kind of wait for every year to say, hey, need the data, let's see what happened with the cost per ride, the number of rides, is that we haven't fully delved into it to say, as we expect council would say, do we have an alternative that is going to reasonably meet the need? Not everybody's entirely happy of the folks who need it, right? Or are we going to say, oh, we've got this idea, you could do this. Y'all say, oh, great, staff, that sounds great, let's do it. And then you're getting call after call after call of people going, this doesn't meet my need. And you're going, staff, you didn't tell me that, right? The population that most needs the help, we've left out. And that's what we want to, I think, fully explore.
Okay, motion's been made by Councilmember Gibson, second by Councilmember Watson. Councilmember Bacalusa, do you have a question?
No, it wasn't a question. I just think that the staff's on the right trajectory on this. Just don't really have much option right now, but let's take a look to see if there are better options, whether for customer service, cost, and everything included. So, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Westbrook.
Do we happen to know the demographics of the riders? VA, veterans?
You know, we might. Most, again, are over 60. I mean, we've got a substantial number that, you know, are over 60, more than half, call it 2/3. So it tends to be an elderly population. I don't know that I've got a breakdown on the number that are veterans. We could ask, see if they collect that data. But it tends to be an elderly population or those with disabilities.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Motion's been made. Council, please cast your vote. We can publish the vote, please. We have 7 ayes, no objections. Motion passes. All right, we'll move on to item number 8, ordinance number 24S-145, approving a request to rezone approximately 3.3 acres of land from Manufacturing Light District, M1, to Single-Family Residential District, R6, known as Comal County Property Identification Number 75307, a portion of property also known as 7444, FM 482, City of Schertz, Comal County, Texas, final reading. Now, this item was on our previous council meeting. Councilmember Westbrook was not in attendance. Therefore, we didn't have a unanimous vote. Councilmember Westbrook, would you like to see the presentation?
Yes.
Right. Mr. Haas, floor is yours.
Good evening. Ordinance 24S-145, zone change from Manufacturing Light District M1 to Single Family Residential R6. So this is a 3.3 acre request to rezone out of a larger lot that is approximately 4.25 acres. It's up on FM 482. This is just kind of get your bearings here, this is 482. This is in the north of Schertz. So right now there is a existing residential use and a business on the property. On June 21st, 2024, a total of 6 public hearing notices were sent out. There were 0 responses, and 1 sign was posted on the property. So as you can see, this is what the applicant is requesting to do. This is all one property here, and they're just requesting to rezone portions of their property. So they're gonna not rezone the middle strip here, and they're going to rezone the R6 there. So again, as I mentioned previously, right now there's a permitted business on the property, and there's also a non-conforming use of a residence. So the city of Schertz does not permit residential uses in commercial districts. So basically what the property owner is trying to do is build a bigger home, and then in order to do that, they have to come into compliance with city code and rezone it to a residential portion. But they would like to keep their business as well, so they are leaving the center strip of their property M1 in order to keep their existing business, which they've had. So when we're evaluating zone changes, we look at UDC Section 2154D, and I'll just go through this one at a time for you. So whether the proposed zone change or zoning map amendment implements the policies of the adopted comprehensive land plan, including the land use classification on the property, the future land use map. So with this property, the comp plan actually designates this area as mixed-use center, which is intended to integrate residential, commercial, and often entertainment spaces. This was done with the idea of having this as a future new town center, this whole area at one point, and I'll kind of show you that on the map here. So you can see that this property is in yellow, outlined in yellow here, and the mixed-use center is along the rail tracks, and that is in compliance with the comp plan. So this is actually increasing a little bit of that denser residential is what we want to see in that mixed-use center. Number two, whether the proposed zone change or zoning map amendment promotes the health, safety, and general welfare of the city and the safe, orderly, efficient, and healthful development. The city should encourage development that's compatible with actually surrounding uses. And the surrounding area is consisting of mostly open space, residences. Danville Middle School is right across the street.
Yes, sir. The, when you sent out to the neighbors, you received any negative?
No negative, no, nothing opposed, nothing in favor, nothing neutral.
Have enough to make a decision if you want to stop.
Sure, yeah.
All right.
Staff's recommending approval. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval with 6-0, and as mentioned before, City Council also recommended approval.
Thank you, Mr. Haas. All right, council, floor is open for questions. Any questions? This is our final reading on ordinance 24S-145. Do I have a motion to approve?
So move.
Do I have a
Second.
second? Okay. Have a motion made by Councilmember Watson and second by Councilmember Hayward. Any other comments? Council, please cast your vote. We can publish the vote, please. We have 7 ayes, no objections. Motion passes. We'll move on to item number 9, resolution number 24R100, authorizing a purchase from Musco Sports Lighting LLC, a by-board purchasing cooperative vendor for the Schertz Soccer Complex Lighting Project. Ms. Gonzalez, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. So I am filling in for Lauren tonight. Sarah Gonzalez, Assistant City Manager. Excited to be here for this project and for the next step on it. It's an item that you all are familiar with. We've talked about multiple times. This is the lighting for the soccer complex. When it was built, it was only built with 2 lighted fields. At the time, conduit was installed for future wiring at the time of construction on all the fields except field 12. This project is to run electrical wiring through the existing conduits, install new conduit, and wire to field 12 and install a light structure system. It's also going to include retrofitting the existing lights on field 1 and field 2 to LED for more energy efficient savings and better light control. So this project, as I mentioned, has been listed on the Park CIP document, and earlier this year, the Economic Development Corporation committed funding of $1.7 million, and the remaining funding will come from the Parks budget. The vendor proposed is Musco, as the mayor mentioned, and we have used Musco in the past for the baseball field lights at the Johnny McDowell Baseball Complex, and the current lighting at the soccer complex is Musco. So all the new items that I mentioned will integrate with the old and their technology. So now, once approved, the timeframe we are looking at is about 8 to 10 week delivery of lights upon order, and then planning to start construction once the fall season ends. We're hopefully looking at a November to January time construction frame, and the plan would be that it would be hopefully ready to go in time for spring season. So again, happy to answer any questions you may have or do my best, but we are recommending approval of this.
Councilmember Macaluso.
Has there been, what's the current policy with the fields and the lighting?
With what, I'm sorry?
Are the customers being charged for use of the fields with the lighting?
So yes, we have agreements with Graca that runs, it's like a license agreement, and so they are paying a portion of it. But as we discussed, as this goes in, to look at those agreements and to be able to factor in, because it is going to be an increase of electricity use and how that's going to be passed on, looking at resident, non-resident usage. So that'll be looked at.
Okay, thank you.
Council, any other comments? Councilmember Watson.
motion we approve Resolution 24R100.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Watson and second by Councilmember Brown. Any other comments? Council, please cast your vote. We can publish the vote, please. We have 7 ayes, no objections. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gonzalez. All right, we'll move on to our public hearing. Item number 10, ordinance number 24T150. Conduct a public hearing and adopt a budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1st, 2024, and ending September 30th, 2025, in accordance with the charter of the City of Schertz, Texas, providing for a filling of the budget, providing for this ordinance shall be cumulative of all ordinances, providing a severability clause, and providing an effective date. Mr. Walters, floor is yours.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is James Walters. I'm the Finance Director for the City of Schertz. Tonight, I'm going to go over the budget presentation real quickly and then so we can move on to the public hearing portion. So the budget overview and update, so the budget priorities, the staff and council came together. Work staff compensation, goal 2 infrastructure, focusing on street maintenance and repair, providing a consolidated CIP document, increasing staffing levels, and goal 5 newer model facilities. For the operating budget proposed for next year, as originally proposed, it includes the health insurance savings for all funds that we approved earlier tonight, wage adjustments, including a market position for compensation. We're maintaining that current position we have with an ECI adjustment of about 4.4% that would be effective in October, and a merit step program coming back as it was not done this current year, as well as proposed adding additional incentive pay adjustments with an overall cost increase. Under the general fund expenditures, proposed budget was $53,111,000. This is an increase of just over $1.8 million or 3.6% from the 23-24 adopted budget. Non-personnel budgets decreased about 1.9, while street supplies, utilities, tourist payments, and software maintenance were increased. They were offset by less street maintenance that was temporarily funded in 23-24. Personnel budgets increased 8.4% caused by the ECI adjustments, full-year funding of positions that started mid-year this year, and full-year funding of the class and comp study. We had higher deployment costs, but were slightly offset by the lower insurance costs that were approved. So in addition, for the general fund, we had about $700,000 of non-discretionary item increases, includes property liability insurance, the tourist contribution, utility increases, mainly electrical, and the IT increases of $331,000. 144 was for the PD RMS software that was approved earlier this year, as well as the replacing some GTACs, which are the laptops inside of our emergency service vehicles to maintain CGIS compliance. The older models do not accept Windows 11, which they will need to do by October 2025. In addition, there's $1.3 million in expanded programs, which includes the ECI, the Merit Step program, adjustments to our existing incentive pay program of $125. Our incentive pay, we do have that currently, and the $125,000 listed is the changes that were proposed by staff, as well as the insurance adjustment for the general fund portion, $375,000. It's also a little lower than we saw in the presentation because those changes will also affect, or won't take into effect until January. So what was shown before was a full 12-month cycle, but for the next fiscal year, it would only be for 10 months since it starts in January instead of October. So the overall budgets for the past few years as a final adopted, you can see going from 51.2 to 53.1 as originally proposed by staff. The changes to personnel with our anticipated year end in the shaded line, and then the proposed for next year. Under the operating, the non-personnel, non-capital items, dropping slightly, increasing a little bit over the year projections. On the capital outlay, this is one we've seen, and EMS Director Jason mentioned earlier tonight that we're still seeing some long lead times from ordering some of the larger equipments. Those have happened over the past couple of years, and we're seeing a couple more of those come in this year, which is why I anticipate a slightly higher amount. On the general fund revenue side, the sale of veteran homestead exemption continues to grow in the city of Schertz. The total exempt value is just under $1 billion now, with taxes foregone of $4.8 million. And just an example, if that exemption did not exist for the state of Texas, the city could raise the same amount of tax revenue that we've originally proposed, but with a rate of 0.4107 instead. The DVHS program is a great program the city of Schertz continues to support and encourage. The veterans in the city and around the state have given a lot. This is just a small thing that we can do to give back to them. We do ask that the state properly fund the program, and with that, council approved a resolution back in July supporting legislation that would properly fund the program. But sadly, there has been no change to the state aid funding amount for this next year. So we actually had 2 more entities applying for it this year, which cut our amount that we received from $1.2 million to $800,000 out of the $3.1 million that we requested. So I'll touch on the tax rate. I know it's the next item, but the tax rate definitions, so the state has us calculate a couple of rates. The no new revenue rate, so that would be the rate that if council adopted, the city would raise the same amount of overall tax revenue that it did the current year. Let's say if we didn't add in new properties, that would give, if we bought in $21 million, we get $21 million in tax revenue with that rate. Plus, if we had new buildings that were developed or added to the tax rolls, that would be where the source of the increase would be. We also have the voter approval rate, which is the highest rate council can adopt without triggering an automatic election. Also, the current rate, I'll show you on the next slide, as well as the proposed maximum as originally presented by the staff. So the current rate is 0.4872. The no new revenue rate is 0.4805. The voter approval rate is 0.4990. And the proposed tax rate, which is the preliminary tax rate set by council, is 0.4990. Council can ultimately adopt a rate lower than that, but we could not go higher at this point. 1 penny is equal to about $565,000 in revenue, or $34.31 annually on the average home. The M&O rate, which is the rate that goes into our general fund that pays for normal day-to-day operations for the city, would go from 0.3324 to 0.3416. The INS rate, which goes solely to pay the city's debt, would go from 0.1548 to 0.1547, for a total increase from 0.4872 to 0.4990. What that would look like on the tax bills, the voter approval rate would raise the average tax bill to $63.47, which would be an increase of 3.9% as an annual increase. If we maintain the current rate of 0.4872, it would be an average increase of $22.98 annually, or about 1.4% increase. Historically, the tax rates in 2018, we had 0.5146. 2019, we maintained that 5146. In 2020, we dropped to 5121. Maintained that in 2021 at 5121. 2022, we dropped to 495. The current year, we're at 4872, and the original proposed was 4990 for next year. The orange is the INS rate, and the blue is the M&O. The 5-year forecast for the general fund, we're currently projected to be about 31% of our operating revenues in our fund balance. With the proposed budget next year, with our expenses higher than our revenues, we propose to drop that down to 25%. Our ordinance lets us take it 1 year to get back to the 26% with a plan, which we plan to do by 25-26. And then could continue to grow, but that is a representation of our capacity for new programs going forward. The INS rate of 1574 allows us to issue the $20 million. We'll be back on next council meeting. For 24-25, the following, we could do another almost 14 million, 25-26, 23.5, and then 27-28, almost 15 million, which will help fund our CIP program, which would be new roads, facilities, and parks for the general fund in the city. This is what the debt payments average would look like, along with each of the new issuances. You can see the gray is our current debt issuances or debt payments. Those continue to drop as we continue to go along and pay off our existing debt, which will allow for additional debt to be issued. Along with our growing community, we believe that there would be no further changes to the INS tax rate. Of the water and sewer fund, They propose adding 5 water and wastewater worker ones, a meter technician, and reclassifying the service representative to administrative assistant, also with some new vehicles and equipment, and a $3 million transfer to the CIP fund for additional projects. This is their 5-year forecast. They're sitting about 32% fund balance. We see the extra $3 million transfer that we'll have out in 24-25. That's where that big portion comes in, and drops them down to 26%. And then with their current projected CIP plan and debt issuance, they could drop down to about 18% in their fund balance without any further adjustments to their the water rates and sewer rates. Under the EMS fund, they'll have a position, all changes to the mid-year, about April, part-time to full-time for the supply coordinator, adding a 12-hour battalion chief our battalion chiefs are currently 24-hour positions. We propose to move them to 12-hour positions, which actually add 1 battalion chief to make that happen, so it's a new position. And then adding a peak hour truck would be staffed by two new EMTs. And then propose on the fee schedule, the increase for the fees added $1.3 million of revenue to help fund the program. This is their 5-year forecast. So they're currently estimated to have a negative cash by the end of this year, continuing down to about $800,000. And then with no further enhancements other than about 2% on the wages, they'll continue to be negative for at least 2 years and then have finally cash in 29-30 of just under $1 million. The capital improvement program, the general fund plans to have 20 projects underway next year, 7 street projects, 2 parks, and 11 facilities for a total of $30.3 million. That includes the $20 million that we plan to issue hopefully at the next council meeting, as well as programs that were already existing funded from previous years. On the water and sewer, they could have 18 projects undergoing next year. That includes the ARPA funds, the federal grant money, as well as the $3 million we mentioned, as well as some other bonds to continue on their projects. The drainage CIP, part of the next year's proposed bond issuance will be about $1 million to continue with some drainage projects. And then we have some, based on council's, what we heard from council last council meeting, as well as the retreat, staff has prepared a couple of options that Mr. Williams will look over.
Thank you, James. So council, as you're aware, we did have the budget retreat on August 2nd, and then again, we had a discussion on the 6th at the last council meeting. Staff has heard your different thought processes in terms of how we should propose the budget, and this is localized to the general fund because the tax rate is what affects the general fund for the most part. We've come back with different options for you to consider and looking for direction on how to proceed. And there's language in front of you in terms of how to make the motion. Just bear in mind that that could be amended based on whatever you decide. Just plug in the number that we would, and James can easily calculate that number for us. So I'm gonna walk through this table just briefly and go through the different options that are presented. Essentially, option 1 is what was included in the proposed budget that you saw on the 2nd and on the 6th. So that maintains a $49.90 tax rate, and that is what is considered the voter-approved tax rate. That's as high as you can go without having a mandatory election. Also, it included an ECI, a cost of living adjustment. We use the ECI, Employment Condition Index, produced by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It's a metric that the city has used for a number of years in terms of gauging cost of living adjustments. And that was at 4.4%. What that did is moves everybody's base pay by 4.4%, as well as the steps, the entire step structure, and the grades themselves would move, and everybody within those. There was a lengthy presentation and discussion about the incentives program and a proposed expansion of that Jessica went over. As James mentioned, we already have money in the budget for an incentive program. This $125,000 was simply an expansion to that, increasing some of those pays. Option 2 would be to maintain the current tax rate of $48.72 and then lower the ECI down to 3% and not include the increase to the incentives pays. And then down there at the bottom, we have fee change as well. You see in the later options. And then option 3 is to maintain the same tax rate at 4872, do a 3.5% ECI, don't include the increase to the incentives pays, and then increase fees across the board by 5%. Now, this is most of our fees, but it doesn't include things like our water, sewer, road impact fees, or our water and sewer rates, et cetera. So it's our baseline fees, but not some of the others that are driven by mandatory costs or by state law. And then option number 4 is in the middle. It's at 4931 for the tax rate and a 4% ECI, including the incentive increase, and then also the increase to the fees across the board. And bear in mind, when we're talking about the ECI or the cost of living adjustment, that would apply to all employees in all funds, not just to the general fund, even though the general fund is the only one impacted by the tax rate change. So we have staff here. We're happy to answer any questions you might have and just look for your direction moving forward.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Williams. Now, this is on the agenda as an open public hearing. Is there anyone in attendance who would like to address the City Council in reference to this subject? Anyone? Please, well, as you're coming up, for clarity, if we approve this ordinance, 24T150, on our next step, everything else will remain the same except one of these options, based on the tax rate that the council approves. Am I correct?
So the first item is on the budget. So council could take one of the pre-existing options here and give us direction, which we would then roll into the next presentation in the budget, and that would be our starting, if that's how council goes.
Okay.
So
So everything that will be approved on the budget, council's direction will be based on this tax rate as to
this will be,
the
yeah,
changes,
based on,
the
yeah.
changes that would be made for the next public hearing.
Yes, and council can change the budget even in the next meeting as well. So if this passes and something changes, council can give direction. We approve the budget with these changes and state the changes in the motion, and staff will go back and make those changes to the actual final adopted budget
Thank
document.
you. Thank you for the clarity. Once again, it is an open public hearing. Anybody like to address the City Council? Going once. Going twice. All right. Public hearing is closed. All right. Councilmember Davis.
Yes, Mr. Williams, did you say these options do include the STEP program as well for public safety?
No, the STEP is actually separate. So there's a STEP program for the public safety departments, the actual sworn personnel, and the EMS.
I understand that, but, so that's programmed into the budget regardless of whether we talk about option 1, 2, 3, or 4?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, and what about the merit?
The merit as well is programmed into the budget.
So, just to be clear, if we keep our tax rate the same at 4872, you're still looking at doing a step for all the public safety, and each step is a 4% change, correct?
Correct.
And you're still looking at doing a merit for all the non-public safety people, which is generally 2%.
Correct.
And then you'd be doing a 3% ECI on top of that. So everyone would potentially see either a 5% or a potential 7% pay increase without changing the tax rate and without addressing a fee change, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I don't think a 7% or a 5 to 7% pay increase in our current economic environment without increasing the cost to our residents by increasing their tax rate or increasing their fees is an unreasonable thing.
Okay. All right. Councilmember Macaluso.
First, appreciate staff putting together the different options. I know that we had a lot of different opinions, and I appreciate you putting stuff out there that maybe all of us could be satisfied with one way or the other. But I do, tend to agree with Councilman Davis. I'm not a supporter of increasing the property tax rate, as I mentioned before. I'm personally open to either option 2 or 3. I'm not opposed to fee increases if it's still keeps us competitive on those fees and allows a higher ECI. I think that's fine. But just to clarify, this is just, when it says the incentive pay, it's not that incentive pay is completely being removed. It's just that the changes of possibly increasing some of those will be taken out for now.
That is correct.
Okay, so the employees are still receiving the incentive pay. They're still receiving a pay increase on the ECI. Then they're also still with the merit. Like Councilman Davis said, I mean, there's a potential there for a lot of the employees to still see a substantial increase without passing that cost down to the homeowners. So as I mentioned, I'm inclined to like option 2 or 3 myself.
All right, Councilmember Westbrook.
Yeah, so I think this boils down to what we're getting around to is where we are at, each individual on the tax rate. Staff has recommended a 0.49. 4872 keeps it as is, which I'm not opposed to, but personally, I think the 4931, the option 4, does allow us a little bit more options in terms of increasing the tax rate. But I don't agree with the 4% ECI, more with the 3% ECI. I'm not in favor of the incentive pay, but I am in favor of increasing the fees. I think I don't think that's a negative to increase some of our fees compared to our cohort, our comparison cohort. So I'm somewhere in between all of these 1, 2, 3, and 4.
It doesn't help us.
But the staff is capable, if we give them direction on the tax rate. That's where it all begins, is the tax rate. We have 2 individuals that are opposed to tax rate. I'm in favor of increasing it slightly, maybe not to the 4990 that the staff has recommended, but obviously, I think there's some revenue that can be generated that can serve other purposes for the city of Schertz, maybe some roads and some of the other revenue may be able to be used for some of the other, some other purpose for the city of Schertz other than just salary.
Okay. Well, thank you for your comments. I think in this situation,
Maintenance.
yeah, I think. Mhm. So, all right, Councilmember Brown.
Yeah, I don't want to start getting into a raise lower, raise lower, raise lower cycle on tax rates either. After I looked at other municipalities and cities, what they're doing this year, I think option 3 is probably a good option for us. It maintains our tax rate. I believe that this year is going to be just kind of a not as much as we would like year, but I think with all the development that we have coming in the next couple of years, I think that our tax base is going to increase enough to get back in the game. And I don't think that limiting our ECI to 3.5% is going to take us that far off of the pay scales.
Okay. Any other comments? Before we approve the budget, from I understood from the council, it does require a 5-2 vote.
For the budget, it was not.
The budget doesn't, the tax rate does.
Yes, sir.
And knowing on the comments that were made here by the council, I can see that option 1 and option 4 have been removed from the table. I know for a fact option 1 has been removed as far as the discussion. Option 4, I think there was some not clear decision on that one. So at this point, I think we could remove option 1 as being anything that we can discuss at this point. Councilmember Hayward, comments?
Yeah, my comment, we don't have the votes for option 1. After looking at some of the information that was sent in an email with the surrounding cities, option 1, we're keeping pace with some of the cities that we're surrounding. And we always want to say that we're the premier city and we do premier stuff, so we got to start acting like the premier city and being a premier city, or are we just saying we want to be mediocre? And so I know that I don't have the votes for option one, but to me, that's kind of where I look at those things, and I also look at the fact that everyone keeps going, oh, people won't leave for 4.4 if they don't get it. Maybe not all, but some. And then taking into consideration, typically when you're trying to replace an employee, and we're not talking first responders, it's probably gone up from the last time I asked, $6,000 to onboard someone. Then when we bring somebody new on, because somebody might decide to leave, and I know everyone goes, oh, that's a big might. I get it. But then we're not paying them what we're paying someone currently. We have to pay them what the new pay scale is. So let's say we've got somebody that's, I'm gonna go with a director pay, $150,000, they decide they want to leave and they can make more money and they're whatever the case is, then we gotta bring them on at 165 or 175 to get somebody else to replace the person that left. And then on top of that, we're paying the cost of onboarding. So I'm looking at all those factors as when we play cost for onboarding with the number of people that may leave, we don't know. And I just go, we always want to say Schertz, we want to be the premier city, we want to be the branded city, we want people to know where Schertz is. This is one way of getting us out there. We're being comparative with the other cities that came on. There are some cities around us that's given a whole lot more than 4.4% ECI. Some of them are splitting it in half. But I know I don't have the votes for one, so I'm more of an option 4 kind of person.
Councilmember Brown.
Yeah, I think one of the things we need to put back into this equation too is the ECI itself. That 5.1% was a national ECI, and not regionalized by any means, so it's an easy number for everybody to grab onto because it's in the same headlines everywhere. But if you dial down, our ECI in the local area is more around 4, okay, maybe even a little bit less. So we aren't doing anybody wrong in that 3.5% range. We're not screwing anybody out of a 1.5% raise or anything like that. I think we're being realistic for our region, our cost of living, versus national comparisons. So again, I'm good with 3, because 4872, we probably should never have gone down that low to begin with. But now that we're here, I hate to see the idea of going back and forth, up and down, up and down. Yeah.
Okay. All right, Councilmember Macaluso.
Just one other thing to point out is that, when we're looking at some of the other cities, that's not taken into consideration if they also had an increase last year like we had. So they might be trying to catch up at this point, so some of them might be higher than what we are, but that's because we did a pretty substantial increase from last year.
Excellent point. Councilmember Westbrook.
Well, when it comes to the tax rate, I'm not in favor of going up and down, up and down. However, for 5 years from 2018, 19, 20, 21, we were at 0.51. Then y'all went down, now we're at 0.48. What I'm afraid of at some point in the future, we're going to be forced to go from 0.48 and make a more dramatic increase, from 0.48 to maybe who knows what it's going to be, as opposed to, slowly sliding the rate back up. We have to make different choices. I think the money is there. The other aspect of this is staff done their due diligence. If we trust the staff, they have recommended a 0.499. If we maintain what does that say to the staff if we say, no, it's 0.4872? They've done their due diligence. I would think they know what's best for the city. They're the subject matter experts. And so I sort of, I don't want to split it down the middle per se, but sort of option 4, 4931. But I'm still not opposed, still not in favor of the whole ECI of 4.0. I think we can use the money for some other reason, but 3.5%, I would think would be fair for most employees.
All right, Councilmember Gibson.
Sorry, Councilmember Westbrook already made my call with that, with the tax rate being at 0.51 for the last couple of years pre-COVID. So I'm good to go.
Okay. Councilmember Macaluso.
Yeah, just let me push back against that a little bit because I think, we have an economic development program in place and the purpose of it is to grow our tax base and hopefully with sales tax, maybe we can lessen the burden on our homeowners. And so I think this thought of, what's the point of having our program if it's not going to help us do that? And, we have the big project coming in that should provide some substantial increase in our sales taxes, and that will help the city budget outside of just throwing it onto the homeowners over and over again.
Councilmember Brown.
Yeah, and a point on the tax rates there, the 0.51 years, we had to raise taxes because we had lowered them so much in 08, 9, 10, in that time frame. I forget what year was which, but the quote-unquote recession, council said, oh, we got to take care of our people and lower tax rates. Well, it caused us to have to raise them afterwards because we were too low. And that's why I say I don't want to start chasing up and down on tax rates right now, especially with the solid economic forecast that we have coming in for next year. Like Councilman Macaluso said, we've got some good retail potential numbers coming in to offset any rate changes. So again, that's my thought.
Okay. Councilmember Hayward.
I think the biggest issue is when we're talking about the tax rate is our biggest issue, which I agree, the state is not funding the veterans exemptions. That's where we are losing our money. Would never dream of taking that away from anyone. I am planning on, as a TML president, that is one of those things that we passed at the policy summit last week. It was passed. It will go to the business meeting in October so that we can try to get that passed. But it's trying to find someone in the legislature who will agree to it. It's been there before, and the state is what is putting the burden on the cities because they are not funding that properly, even when they have the influx of revenue. They try to decide what they're going to do with this, excess sales tax revenue and what they're going to fund. And so with that, we really need to push the state and say, hey, we love the program. We think the veterans have sacrificed, their families have sacrificed. Some of them have sacrificed more than others. And we need the program. We appreciate you doing the program, but we need you to fully fund it. And that is why we have this deficit of $4.8 million. And I don't like having to put it on the residents because of that. So I'm more of the option 4. I know we have some things coming on with economic development. They're moving kind of slow. I was against lowering the rate last year, but the state made us do that based on that new SB 2 bill that passed where we had to lower the rate. We were forced to. We couldn't even stay at maybe 4.972. We had to go to 4.872. So again, advocating for the state to not change any more of laws on how cities get revenue, because I think a lot of times, and how we fund our cities, I think a lot of times they don't realize the mechanisms in which cities fund. I mean, I think they just don't get it. Because people will complain about their tax bill, and they don't realize that in our area, not in other areas like Bexar County, you're paying a whole lot of other things. We're paying city tax, county tax, school tax. And the biggest person that gets the bulk of our money on that sales tax, on our property tax, is the school district. And I'm not trying to take money from the school district either. But we have to look at this, to me, in totality of we keep chasing, going up and going down, and most of the reason we're doing that is state. And so when people think that, yes, as a council person, you just need to focus on local, yeah, you do, but you gotta watch what's going on in the state. Matter of fact, today, because I had council meeting, I didn't go up to the legislature. They were doing they were having a meeting on appraisals. don't know what's coming out of that and what they're going to change with that. And if that's going to affect the cities, I'm waiting to hear back what they discussed. But they do things and they put them on at the last minute, and you find out at the last minute that they're doing things. So we, as a council as a whole, I am making sure that we start focusing on what's going on up in Austin and making phone calls and talking to them and making connections with our people that represent us. Because until we make connections and try and explain this to them, we're going to always be in this position on whether we raise tax or lower tax because we don't have an option. So we need to also keep that in mind, that we need to be focusing on that. And so that's kind of what I wanted to put out there. Just understand that the staff did all this work. They figured what the budget is. And sometimes we have to rely on our experts. We're not the experts in this. And so we need to also think about that. What do we say when we're saying, hey, yeah, you may be the expert, but we can't follow what you say. So we also have to look at that. I'm no expert on revenues and what we need to do and what the city needs. So that's just something I wanted to say about that. We just need to look at the state, focus on that, and see how we can change things around for maybe next year. And with EDC, hopefully the sales tax revenue will kick up, and then we might be lowering it again.
Councilmember Westbrook.
Thank you. So I think with the economic development, taxes will come, but never soon enough, right? It will never come soon enough. And we had a drop list at our budget session. It was a drop list, and for the most part, they said that we could fund everything based upon this option number one. We could fund everything except for there was a lot of things a lot of projects we were not entitled to do or not capable of doing, right? So if you go with option 4, since option 1 is gone, if you go with option 4 and don't give the 4%, 3.5%, maybe, I'm not in favor of incentives, but you raise the fees, we don't have to drop as much off the drop list. There's quality of life issues that we have to deal with here, beyond just a pay raise for the employees. I mean, streets, parks, there's a lot of other issues that money could be used for. And if Schertz is going to distinguish itself from its surrounding communities, and the vision is, when they drive through Schertz, they know Schertz is better. We're moving from any other neighboring community to Schertz, and once they leave Schertz, they'll be like, oh, I've noticed I've lost Schertz. There has to be a vision here where our community, our safety, our first responders, our roads are better than our neighboring communities. I'm trying to distinguish ourselves from the neighboring communities, and I don't think we're going to get there with the 0.48. And this goes beyond the pay for the employees. This goes with other projects that can come back on the list from that drop list.
All right, thank you for those comments. Just to put everything into perspective, we're debating over a penny, right? That's what we are, debating over a penny. And the implementation, and there's a lot of good points that were made here. The implementation of Disabled Vets Program, it is a noble cause, but that put us in the hole for $5 million. And that's why we're struggling here today, to try to make up the difference of less than $600,000. And Councilman Macaluso brought up some interesting points. We have Park 35 that should open up some of their facilities this coming year, so that would increase our tax base. We have Emory coming on also, the single-family rentals that will increase it, and Schertz Station right in front of that, which will help us. In my opinion, I think we're looking at a short-term issue at this point that will resolve itself when we have our discussion next year. And we'll see ourselves in a better situation. But it comes down to, we have to make a decision here today on the tax rate. And as I have noticed, is option number 1 has been completely removed as discussion. So we're down to option 2, 3, and 4. What I like to do is get a consensus as far as whether or not option 4 is still on the table. I need at least, to try to find out exactly, we got to do this by the process of elimination. And we already eliminated number one. Now we have to eliminate one of the other three remaining. So well, we can't take a vote at this point. So
Mayor, may I ask, what item are you on? Because you need to adopt
yes,
the
we need to
budget.
pass the budget first.
Yeah,
I think we
okay.
should pass the budget first and then come back to the
You
tax
pass the
rate.
tax rate that supports the
Exactly.
budget.
All right,
Yeah.
so let's go ahead and do that. Do I have a motion to approve 24T 150?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion made by Councilmember Gibson, second by Councilmember Watson. Council, please cast your vote. We can publish the vote, please. We have 6 ayes, 1 objection. Motion passes. Now, the budget has been approved, but what is in discussion now, and let me read number 11, item number 11, ordinance number 24T 151. Conduct a public hearing and approve an ordinance approving the appraisal rolls, setting the tax rate, levying and accessing general and special ad valorem taxes for the use and support of the municipal government of the city of Schertz, Texas. This is our first reading. Mr. James, the floor is yours.
Hey, Mayor and Council. I'm going to stay right here on this slide.
All right.
So the options before you on the packet was 0.4990. Based on the discussion, council can set or adopt a new rate. The two that I heard was, this will be a public hearing as well, but I want to like to frame
Yes,
up
it is a public
the other
hearing.
information. So the 0.4872, the motion would be we adopt a rate of 0.4872, which is effectively a 1.4% increase in the tax rate, or the 0.4931, so we would adopt a tax rate of 0.4931, which would be effectively an increase of 2.6% in the tax rate.
Okay.
So those would be the two options. The INS rate would stay the same at 1574. The M&O would adjust accordingly, and that would be fine for the motion. So we would account for that.
All right, thank you for that. All right. This item is on the agenda as an open public hearing. Is there anyone in attendance who would like to address the city council in reference to this subject? Going once, going twice. Public hearing is closed. All right. Council, here we go. We got three options. Well, actually, 2 tax rates, and it all depends on the other options that are available with the tax rates. So I'll start it off with Councilmember Gibson.
I'm just making sure, did we discuss, because we've been discussing this whole time. I want to make a motion, but if there's further discussion, then I'll allow it.
Okay. Yes, please hold on the motion, because once we make a motion, then we have to limit discussion. Okay? All right. Councilmember Davis.
If we went with the 4872, what would be the percentage and increase in the tax rate?
Percentage increase in what, sir?
If we went with the 4872, what would be the increase in the tax rate?
1.4%.
1.4%.
Pardon?
1.4%.
Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Hayward.
Going off of what Councilmember Westbrook said, when we had our pre-budget meeting and we talked about the things that wouldn't happen, was under the 0.4872, was that the one when we were saying if we did this, then certain things wouldn't happen, like there's a lot of training that would not be taking place and the pools will be closed, or is that just the way that you were looking to find money to make up the difference?
That was an option that we originally talked about during that procedure. These options up here have none of that. So all of that would remain separate and we'd all be fully funded. There'd be no decrease in the operating budgets. What staff has proposed in lieu of that is what's on the board here.
Okay. Is there a consensus here on the option number 4, or 4931?
Yes.
I think so.
Well, let's see. Let's-
Make the motion and
well,
let's see where
We
it
can make a motion
goes.
and see on option number 4 at 431, exactly as it's written with a 4% and 125 incentive pay.
So,
Before I do, Councilmember Westbrook has a question.
Wait, when we're seeing option 4, we're taking option 4 as everything in there, the tax rate, the ECI, the incentive pay, and the fee change?
That is correct. It does require a 5-2 vote. If we don't have 5, we will take it off of an option. It will be removed, and we'll go option 2 and 3.
To be clear, if you go with the .4931, that will have no impact on the budget that was just adopted. If you wanted to make changes after that or give staff other direction, we could set the tax rate here and then we could craft a budget with options or adjustments, however you see fit. This is just a vote to set a tax rate and then we would adopt the budget or make changes to it separately.
We'll work back in.
We'll work it back in.
I'm just against the incentive pay. That's a lot of money. That's a lot, we're going to, all right,
What?
thank you. We can vote.
Yeah, okay. Councilmember Gibson, you have another comment?
I was trying to make my motion, but I'm waiting
Okay.
to make sure everybody's good.
Everybody, okay, let's go ahead and make a motion.
I move, say what? I move that the property tax rate be increased by the adoption of the tax rate of .931, which is effectively at 2.6% increase in the tax rate.
All right, council, please cast, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion made by Councilmember Gibson and second by Councilmember Hayward. Council, please cast your vote. We can publish the vote, please. We have 4-3, the motion does not pass. So we will remove option number 4, and we'll go back for discussion. We're down to 2 options, option 2 and option 3, with a tax rate of 48.72. And the difference is the ECI and the fee increases. Okay. Right, we'll start off with Councilmember Brown.
Yeah, going back to what Mr. Walters was saying, we're here just to agree on the tax rate, and the rest of this stuff can still be discussed, changed, et cetera.
Yes.
That's all budget items. So all we want to do here is set the tax rate.
That's correct. And we can set the tax rate at 48.72. I think we have a consensus since it's just the little items that we have to probably discuss. Mhm.
And that's what they're very good at, too.
Yes. That's what they work on. All right. Any other comments? Okay. Councilmember Macaluso.
I would make a motion to keep the tax rate the same at .4872.
Okay, could you read the...
I'll second it.
Which is a 1.4.
All right. I make a motion to move that the property tax rate not be increased and be adopted of a tax rate of .4872.
I'm sorry, sir, you have to say it moved to be increased.
It's an increase, but it's still an increase of 1.4%. So what's the first? 1.4.
1.4.
Okay. I mean, I gotta change the wording either way, don't I? Or you have to say it's
do
an
it.
increase? Okay. I move that the property tax rate be increased by the adoption of the tax rate of .4872, which is effectively a 1.4% increase in the tax rate.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion made by Councilmember Macaluso and second by Councilmember Davis. Any other comments? Councilmember Gibson, I see you're flashing. You're okay? All right. All right, council, please cast your vote. Okay. Motion's been made, but if you can publish the vote, we have 4-3. The motion does not pass. Okay, council, I am a little baffled. I don't know which way direction to go. We don't want 4990 or 4931 or 4872. Is there another option that the council is considering? The ECI was not considered.
It's not considered, it's just the
No,
tax rate.
Just the tax rate. Just the tax rate.
How about we split the middle at 49.4900?
Just the tax rate was being considered. We are setting the tax rate. The ECI will be worked on so that we can have it for discussion on our next meeting. Councilmember Westbrook.
Could there be consensus to split it in half from somewhere between 0.4872 and 0.4931? Well, listen, option 2 and option 4 failed. We might as well split somewhere in the middle. We both walk away somewhat disappointed and somewhat satisfied.
Well, I think the tax rate at 4872 will pass. I think the confusion is on the ECI.
No,
if I'm
confusion is not on the
mistaken.
ECI.
No?
We're not all going to be happy, so we might as well all walk away a little bit.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilmember Davis.
I think what some folks don't understand, if we set a tax rate, let's say it is 4872, then that's giving the staff a direction and a guidance. They could come back with a recommendation for an ECI of 3.0. They could come back with 3.5. They could come back and recommend some or all of the incentive pay, because they could also come back and recommend increasing fee changes higher than what's on the screen in front of us. Correct?
They will work the numbers to make sure that they come out with a 4872 and play around with the ECI incentive pay fees and maybe a project or two.
And again, my perspective is at a 4872, which is still increasing the tax liability for all of our property owners. And that's in the statement that we read, that we have to propose the tax rate be increased. It's increasing our taxes, but it is also providing, at least as it's discussed right now, somewhere between a 3 and a 3.5% ECI pay raise for all of our employees. And it's also including their STEP program for all of our public safety, and it's including the merit program for all of our other non-public safety people. The only thing that's kind of in the gray area is the incentive pay, and to what degree, and how you could potentially fund that, which could be with a fund change or a fee change. And again, the fee change could be not as high as 200,000, or technically, I guess it could be higher, because we can review the fees at any time and change our fees in the city at any time. So I don't quite understand why there's a big concern on the 4872. Again, it's increasing the taxes on our property owners, and it's also giving to all of our employees, which was one of our concerns, the taking care of our employees out there.
And Councilmember Davis made a good point. We are setting the tax rate, which means that the ECI can be as low as 3.0 and as high as 3.5 or somewhere in the middle, and the incentive pays could be worked in there, or the fee changes could be worked in there also. This is just setting the tax rate so that it can come back for discussion and see exactly what our city staff has come up with to reach that figure. So with that, Councilman Macaluso.
That also doesn't mean that they don't come back and say, you know what, we could even do an ECI of 3.8 if we keep the tax change, because we found this other area where we can have some savings. Am I wrong or right?
That is correct. Councilmember Westbrook.
For me, this goes to other projects that were on the drop list that would be available to us. I understand we're just talking about the tax rate, but the tax rate from somewhere between 0.4872 to 4931 would allow us to address some of the issues on the drop list that would not ordinarily, be there. That's what, this is not about the ECI and incentive pay, because I'm at the option 2 in terms of that one. I'm talking about things that are on the drop list and the quality of life for the citizens of Schertz. That's where I'm at.
To clarify Councilmember Westbrook's point, I think everything on the drop list was dropped at 4990, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Walters, except the first three items.
So during the budget adoption, staff have proposed currently what you have up here, the ECI being the main item that we're talking about. We could lower that, and if council's direction, add something else from the cut list. Another expanded program that was proposed by staff, but ultimately not picked to be in the final budget to go to council. I believe that is his recommendation to set a tax rate somewhere between 4931 and 4872, and then come back next time with another recommendation that shows less ECI and then another type of item from that list instead.
Okay.
Mayor, I would submit that we did design the budget around the identified priorities by council and by staff. That's why there is such an emphasis on the salary-related items.
Right.
And the prioritization is designed that way, so.
Councilmember Hayward.
I know that we're setting the tax rate, and it has, at this moment, nothing to do with ECI. It is about what our cut list is and things that we can do to fund some of those things that could be a priority for the city. Because we keep wanting to tout the whole Schertz is the premier city. We're the large, right now, we're the sister city that everybody looks up to, and we need to start going in that direction of here we are, we're looking and making Schertz better and different. And as Councilmember Westbrook said, people will know they were in the city of Schertz and when they leave. And it's not about the ECI for me at this point. It's about the things that was on that cut list that we probably need to do. And I want us to be able to do the things that we need to do to make the city where it needs to be and the quality of life issues that could be impacted if we're not doing some of those things on that cut list, because people come to Schertz and they live here because of quality of life issues. That's why they kind of move here. Besides going to a really good school district, they look for some of these quality of life issues, and that's what I'm looking to fund.
Okay. Councilmember Westbrook.
Yes, so, and I think Councilmember Brown and I think Councilmember Hayward both alluded to it in terms of why we are at .4872. He said, he can correct me if I'm wrong, but the reason why we had to go up to .51, 2018, 19, 2021 was because we had cut it too low prior to that one. And then the reason why we had to go from 0.51 to .4872 was because of the legislature, the state system. So both systems indicate that .4872, or our current rate, is artificially low anyway. It should be somewhere north of .4872 to 4931.
To clarify his point, last year, wasn't this the voter-approved rate, 4872?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes. So we went as high as we could by lowering our taxes.
Without triggering an election, yes, sir.
Yes, okay.
It was approximately a 3/4 of a penny reduction.
Yes. So, all right. Councilmember Hayward.
When we lowered it to this, that was because of all the sales tax revenue, and the state, because of SB 2, said we had to lower this to that rate.
Nothing
Correct.
with the sales tax, but SB
As to
change the
for the property
calculation amounts.
Yes, the calculation amounts.
The
Sorry.
highest we could go, yes.
Yes.
So last year, option one is what we went with.
Yes, sir.
Correct.
Basically, yes.
Yeah.
All right.
No, exactly. Well, yeah, basically.
Councilmember Westbrook.
Mayor,
Yes.
we're still stuck. I don't think anybody's going to be happy. I don't know how well we have moved the needle one way or the other. So
I think there has been some movement as far as direction for our staff to work the numbers at 4872 and try to come out with a consensus that this council will approve.
4872 was just voted down. 4931 was voted
They
down.
were all
by the
voted
same-
down. Mhm.
They were all voted down, so there's no consensus. There's nothing that's going to move forward. So we're all going to walk away a little bit disappointed.
No, we're not walking away. We're going to have to make
Well, then,
we're going to have to stay here until we have a consensus.
which means you split in the middle.
So,
The four not voting for the 4872 and the other four aren't voting for the 4931.
If another rate would like to be requested, I can calculate the impacts of the motion could be at that rate.
Can we calculate 490? 0.4900.
900 is effectively an increase of 2%.
Councilman Macaluso?
Yeah, you know, I think we have to remember, we're not, you know, it's on a cut list, but these are wants by staff. And if you looked at that list, to me, very few of them actually affect quality of life of our residents. Money in their pocket affects them a lot more than those things on that list. So, you know, we're not taking into any consideration in our sales tax receipts increasing. Once you have that happen, then you can start considering some of those things. Instead of just saying, you know what, I like, you know, 2 of these things on that list, so let's increase the property tax rate for the residents. That to me just doesn't make sense.
Councilmember Davis?
I have to agree with Councilman Macaluso. I'm looking at the cut list here. And again, the proposed fund were the ECI, the merit to step increases, which are all included under 4872. And the argument to turn around and go to a higher number to take something that didn't make the cut list, I'm seeing like nothing on here that improves the quality of life for our residents. You know, maybe item 7, which is the street worker adding 2 positions, because, you know, we get enough complaints about the quality of our streets and the maintenance of our streets. But other than that, there's really nothing here that just jumps up that is a high quality of life initiative for our residents, or a must do to operate our city.
And as I stated to the council previously, I am in support and endorse the 4872. And I just think that our staff should be given the opportunity to work those numbers with the effective tax rate of 4872. Councilmember Westbrook.
Mayor, 4872 has failed. 4931 has failed. Those 2 options are off the table. There has to be another option. Let's not make this difficult. There has to be some middle ground, some other option. Otherwise, we're going to keep voting for 4872.
I totally agree. Floor is open. If you'd like to make a motion, Councilmember Westbrook.
What's the effective increase for .4899?
.4899 is also 2%, not big enough to be a...
You got it, okay. Thank you. I would,
Well, Councilman Macaluso?
Yeah, can I just make another comment? I mean, even going with the .4872, we're still giving staff the ability to go back and see what they can put together that might satisfy some of the council members. It's not an end all that, well, you know, just because they went with that, we're not going to have any other opportunities to change any of these numbers on. That's not what it is. I mean, they're still going to they have the direction, they understand what people want. It's their job to go back and try to figure out how they can make that work to satisfy the majority of the council.
Mayor, I just want to clarify a comment that I heard being made that all these options are off the table. That's absolutely not true.
No, that's not true.
You
They
can, you
still
can
come back.
re-urge any of these options. You can
Yeah.
make motions for any of these that are here or any
That
other
is
one.
correct. They're still all available. We're just trying to find a reasonable one that we have 5 council members that will approve any one of these options, or option number 5, which is not there.
Mayor, I might qualify a statement. The budget includes a base budget that has a number of items and funding for things that we do and services that we provide. those are embedded in the budget, and they're not in the cut list that you saw before. That includes expanded programs. So those are things that we were requested to be added to the budget. So there are a number of things that are included in the budget itself that we will continue to do, and we are funding with all of the combined revenues, say in the general fund, to provide those services. For example, in the Parks Department, we have $250,000 for smaller park improvements and repairs. In the Streets Department, we have $650,000 for street maintenance. So there are a lot of items. Everything is embedded in the budget itself. That list of expanded program requests is just simply the things that were requested to be added, and they were ranked and put in priority order.
All right, Councilmember Gibson.
You can clear me.
Councilmember Hayward.
So when you did the budget, and you say that everything that was in the budget is included, the inclusion that you did, is that based on 4872, or was that based on the 4.90, so then that way things might change?
The property tax revenues to the general fund make up about 40% of the revenues, James, and then the rest comes from sales tax and other combination of fees, franchise fees for the people who use our right-of-way, and it is a combined total. So the difference in $580,000, $600,000 in terms of a $52 million general fund is 1%, right? So the entire budget does not hinge on that 1%, if that makes sense. Now, do we have to make adjustments? Yes, and in terms of the options we provided, the attempt was to provide a simplified way to review this based on a lot of the discussion that was generated over the last two meetings. So that's what we gravitated to. We pulled away from reducing the base budgets and current services and things that we provide, and gravitated more towards the increase in fees, as well as removal of the increase to the incentive pays and tweaked the ECI. I don't want to say it was the easy route, but it was what was discussed mostly by the council and pinpointed. So we developed those options around that.
Council, need some direction? Councilmember Westbrook?
There's only one way to move forward. This is sort of like here. So, listen, I make a motion. Oh, man, I don't have my glasses. I move that the property tax, these are nice glasses there. Listen. You want these? Oh, my God. I can see the moon. I move that the property tax rate be increased by the adoption of a tax rate of 0.4900, which is effectively a 2% increase in the tax rate.
Second.
Have a motion made by Councilmember Westbrook, second by Councilmember Watson. Any other comment? Council, please cast your vote. If we can publish the vote, please. We do have a consensus. Motion passes 5-2 with a property tax rate of 4900 with a 2% increase. That's some great discussion we had here, huh?
Mayor, so the intent of staff would be to come back with the budget at the next reading and make it fit based on
4900.
on that tax rate in terms of the amount of revenue that it would generate, and then offer options again and have this discussion again in terms of how much the ECI should be. And is that the intent of the council? I just want to make sure that we're hearing correctly. That is the intent.
That is the intent of the council, to come back with a budget with the tax rate of 4900. 0 with a 2% increase and work the numbers to see exactly where the
Well,
budget
correct.
would-
We would adjust the revenue side.
Revenue side.
In terms of making the expenditure side match. Should we provide options again or say that this is what the proposed budget is? Or is it more appropriate to have that discussion now and we can go back and rebuild the budget?
Council, any direction for the staff?
Yes, go build a budget around what we just approved.
Because I heard a number of different opinions on what the ECI should be. Is 3.5 an acceptable ECI?
Yes.
To build around? If there's a consensus of that, we'll return with that.
Okay.
I think
Yes,
that's the-
3.5 is a consensus.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
That helps a lot, thank you.
Okay. We'll move on. We have a workshop regarding city funding of cost of steel utility poles. Mr. James.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, Brian James, Deputy City Manager. So some on council may remember that we came to you guys a little bit less than a year ago to get some direction from council generally on the issue of to what degree the city wanted to fund steel utility poles versus wood utility poles. So again, a little bit of background for those who may be new on council. So again, the city generally has requirements that when a developer comes in, they either have to underground utilities or put up steel utility poles. And there are some provisions for exceptions. And so that's generally what you see going in. But that is a developer-driven project. So when the developer says to CPS or GVC, I need power to my project, the developer is required to pay for that extension, however it's done, and fund the cost of steel poles. When the utility companies, though, come in and they want to do a project to increase power, essentially, they don't have to follow our rules. And their normal standard is to do wood poles. And so that's what happened, if you recall, on the FM 1518 project. They said, hey, it's a road project, we need to upgrade power, we got to move our poles for it. There was discussion, and council funded the cost difference to go from wood to steel on the major corridor of 1518. The other thing we ran into is at times there will be some steel poles. CPS will need to upgrade power with bigger poles. Their normal is to do wood poles. And again, the city would have to then fund the difference in steel and wood, getting a credit to some degree for the steel poles that are there that are coming out, so it costs us less. But when we came back to council on this and said, really, in light of everything we talk about, all the needs the city has, to be frank, how often you hear from residents, man, Schertz is great, except I got to tell you for these wood poles. The general direction seemed to be, let's look at our major corridors as they come up. So again, what you've got on the PowerPoint is 1518, 1103, maybe Schwab Road, Eckert Road, Wiederstein, Redbud Canyon, Lower Seguin, Trainer Hale. These are sort of the big roads that kind of run through our residential areas, as opposed to we're over in an industrial park where people go, it's an industrial park, what's the deal? And that seemed to be some of the direction that staff kind of took. Go back and come up with the list. This is a first blush at it, but it's roughly, if you look at it, maybe 8 or so roads in the city that we would focus on as those efforts come up. But one of the things that, because we hadn't come back, is that one council person mentioned Ray Corbett at the time, and it's kind of a lead in off 1518 into a neighborhood. And so staff hadn't come back. Well, funny enough, CPS came in and said, we need to do an upgrade project, and we need to change out a bunch of those poles on Ray Corbett, coming off 1518, and then it'll go down from 1518 Ray Corbett, and then behind Ray Corbett and between Rhine Valley, it'll head back to the south and take out some poles there. And as I said, they have to replace the steel poles with taller wood poles to accommodate more lines and things like that. So they called us and said, hey, city, what do y'all want to do? Essentially, to upgrade the 10 steel poles on Ray Corbett, it's about $25,000, and that's given the credit that we get for some of the steel poles that are there. Now, if we want to do those 10 and the 10 that run between Corbett and Rhine Valley and go steel on those, it's about $54,000, right? And that's a cost that the city would have to bear. And so staff is seeking direction from council on which way you want to go here with the steel pole issue. Again, staff's kind of general recommendation is that there are a lot of these little sections it would be nice to have sort of steel poles, but as you see in the presentation, if we kind of do Ray Corbett, it opens us up to a whole lot of poles that we would have to replace that are similarly situated roads. It's just a lot of streets that staff thinks we find in those situations. And one of the problems on this that really makes it hard for council to give direction and staff to help guide you or give you options is we just don't know how many of these are going to come up over the course of a year, right? What's going to be the cost? So interestingly enough, since staff put together this presentation, CBS called and said, oh, by the way, or there was some confusion about the status of a permit. They then let us know that as part of the I-35 Next project, they've got to put in 100 poles, okay? And they haven't given us a map which one, and they're not sure quite how tall those are, but we said we'd bring up the issue with council here at least to get some guidance, 100 poles. Now again, what you typically find is the cost of steel poles, at least on the Ray Corbett, run between, depending on the height, $4,700 and $6,000, $6,500. So maybe this thing on 35 would cost us $500,000-ish. Maybe it would go up to 700,000-ish. They're working to get us a list of how tall those poles are, because obviously the bigger pole, more steel, more expensive. And then also they said, keep in mind though, that the cost we gave you on the Ray Corbett are the current costs for what we've got for Ray Corbett. If costs go up, this 35 thing may be more. Now, in theory, I guess it could come down. Staff's position generally is that, again, and I sort of said this, is I've not ever had a resident come in and say, man, I really would rather. I think if you asked them, they'd all say, oh yeah, steel is nicer, I'd rather have that. But it's like all of those things that we do and what you guys just dealt with tonight, which is how much is it really worth it to you to go to steel, or would you rather put that to other things? And so, again, I think, continue with the presentation, if we expanded that list and did sort of Ray Corbett, this is kind of our rough guess at what sort of roads are kind of like that. It's a whole lot more. Now, again, the problem is you're not going to get every one of these in a year. You may have a year where literally it's just 35,000 and we can kind of hunt down the money for it, right? But you may also have this year come up where we've got a few big ones, and again, you're looking at $1 million, something like that. Again, the 35. And again, so I think staff is seeking direction from council. What we were kind of working off is a more limited list of just those major roads, and we can tweak these if we need be, but just the major roads through residential areas are the ones that we would contemplate the upgrade cost, but we would come back to you each time to say this is it. But generally, if it's not sort of one of the ones that we develop on the list, and if the direction is kind of this, we can go back, tweak it, give you a map, that the others, we would just approve those permits that CPS comes in, because they come in applying for a permit, a utility permit, right-of-way permit to do the work. And so we would be able to just say it's not one of the ones generally on there, or it doesn't seem to fit, we'll approve it as is and kind of move it forward. That's generally, I think, where staff's recommendation is, but we can appreciate their other perspectives on it, and thus the work session. And so what we're really looking for directly is, do you want us to consider funding the upgrade for, and now I can't even find it, for Ray Corbett? Just Ray Corbett's 25, we did behind Rhine Valley, it's 54, and then generally what's the thought on I-35 if we want to go back to CPS and say, yep, really give us a breakdown on the cost, or no, not something we want to do. Ma'am.
Okay,
We
Council.
talked about this already. I'm sorry.
You did, and so what staff had said we would do is we said, we'll come back with the list of roads. We had not done that, and so when we watched the video, it was generally the roads, the major roads, residential areas, kind of this, not this list, but there was discussion of, somebody threw in, but Ray Corbett would be kind of nice to do or good to do, and that prompted us to say, let's come back and make sure so that we don't tell CPS, just do wood, and then I got a councilperson going, I brought this up at the thing, you guys ignored me, not trying to do that. And then subsequent to this, they called Friday and said, hey, this 100 poles we're asking about, that's on 35, what do you want to do?
Mr. James, could you put back the list that's on there and
So this is
this
the list
one,
that we came up with, and again, this can be tweaked. We can add a road, we can change one out, but these are roads that are sort of our premier major roads that kind of go through residential areas, if you will. We already kind of did 1518 for part of it. We think 1103 would be the same if that pops up, but it's a fairly short section. We got to check the status of where things are there, where we are on it. The others, again, not quite as major, but they seem to go through large residential area, be more significant roads. That's how we got it. So we can take direction, tweak
So
it.
the question is, do we add Corbett Drive to this list? For now, is basically it.
That's right. But what staff would say is if you add Corbett, and again, this is that
I know.
policy, there are a lot of kind of roads that are more like Corbett out there that we think might get residents saying, well, wait, what was the logic of adding Corbett, but you didn't add mine, right? There's sort of that fairness issue.
And Brian, to be clear, this only applies to situations where CPS or GVEC or NBU would be, say, upgrading a pole and replacing it. And it doesn't affect our subdivision requirements in
That's
our
right.
regular code where a developer
That's right.
would be
A
required to
developer
install
is doing
steel.
it, we're still going to require it to be underground or steel poles. It's just where they're either upgrading or relocating as part of a road project. Yes, sir.
All right. With that, Councilmember Hayward.
I'm not looking forward to the expanded list, and if you go back to the other list, unless you're upgrading Old Wiederstein, in the future, it's not a premier road as of yet.
And I think that's what staff, when we looked at it, just to be clear, when we go in and we make that upgrade of Old Wiederstein, it sort of becomes a premier road. And so likely what you'll have, and this is sort of probably the good and bad news of that is, at some point we got our CIP and it gets funded, and that road becomes this nice premier road. Our assumption is you're going to look at that and say, let's do steel poles on there because of how that fits with the community. You may not, but that would be the idea.
Yeah, I don't agree with Ray Corbett because I don't like this whole expanded list. It ends up, as much as it's a nice to have, I don't think doing Ray Corbett is going to be something we need to fund. I think staying, as we talked about before, the major roads that when they're coming in to do it, then we do that, but I wouldn't change that list.
All right, Councilmember Brown.
Yeah, let's stick to the big roads, stick to the entryways, the high visibilities.
Okay.
The rest of that stuff is secondary, absolutely.
Councilmember Macaluso.
Just a question, just more because of my ignorance on it, but is it a substantial cost to move power underground compared to?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, that's where, I mean, to be blunt, that's where staff gets the most pushback with private developers, is they're usually fighting us on the undergrounding, and if they can get not to underground it, then not that they're happy to do steel poles, but yeah, it's a substantial cost to underground versus overhead. Now, I will say standard practice is within a single-family residential neighborhood, they always underground it, residents expected. It's the kind of getting it there where we have the issues. And again, we have an ordinance that says when it can be overhead and when it has to be underground. But generally, or really within a single-family residential neighborhood, internal, it's all got to be underground. We don't get any pushback on that. It's the getting it there, and then it's these sort of typically commercial situations, but not kind of industrial park even. And I will say that I think staff shows a fair amount of flexibility on this. What's triggered at why? Is it just one? What are the options? Things like that. But yeah, we got a lot of pushback on the undergrounding.
Well, it seems like we got a consensus to stick with the roads that are presented on this slide.
Okay, so what staff will do is we'll let CPS know, no, we're not going to upgrade on the Ray Corbett, we're not planning to do the I-35. What we'll probably do is as a written update, we'll come back with a map to you, and that'll be the map that staff will use. We'll hand out to kind of folks, to CPS, GVC, just so everybody's on the same page. Make sure you guys are good with the map, and then we'll kind of run with that.
Well, Councilmember Brown?
One quick question slant statement. On I-35, if all the other communities are doing steel, we should continue to do steel. I mean, we shouldn't.
I will ask that. I would be shocked
If there's
if
a-
everybody is
But that,
doing.
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying. So tell you what I'll do. I'll go back, if that's the nod, I'll go back and ask CPS. If that's the case, we'll come right back to you, but if not everybody's doing
Yeah,
steel.
and obviously, if everybody's doing wood, there's no reason to go steel.
Yeah,
so.
fair enough. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Mr. James. All right, we'll move on to item number 13, a workshop.
Thank
on
you.
proposal amendments to Chapter 86, Traffic and Motor Vehicles. Mr.
Yes,
James.
this is a very exciting presentation as well. This is one that we have been working on, and it's just slow going. We're trying to get it across the finish line, so we wanted to kind of do a high-level overview. We're not asking for action tonight. It's still under kind of fine review by the city attorney, the police department, a couple other departments looking for tweaks, fine-tuning to make sure we haven't missed any stop signs in the city and things like that. But I want to walk you through, just to give you a heads up, this is generally what we're doing. The major changes, the less significant. And so one of the things is, as with most ordinance updates, there are a lot of cleanup items. We're rewording things, we're tidying up, we're changing the number, we're altering the format a little bit. The last major update of this chapter occurred in '95, so there's a lot of cleanup stuff. So it's going to look, when you see it, really different on the strike-through version, the red line version. But most of those aren't significant changes. It's sort of cleanup, clarification, things like that. Some of it's dated, like, again, and AJ's there, where it talks about you have to give 4 copies triplicate of a ticket when you give out. Now we've got the electronic ticket writers. It's just a little bit of a different world. So some of the dated stuff there. But it's also how we've changed titles. The city engineer versus the traffic engineer. We clarify duties and responsibilities. We're moving stuff around, et cetera. But probably one of the one that we struggled with the most, and this sort of came in, and while we were working on 86, getting it there, TSAC said, hey, let's talk about basketball goals again in the street. And so we had a couple of workshops with TSAC, so credit on this one goes to AJ Arriaga for doing a lot of research on what other communities do, really looking at it, coming forward with something. And the one thing I will say, this is a preface with the basketball goal. When AJ checked, it was the same as previously. No city has said, oh, yeah, we got the perfect ordinance, and it works great, and everybody's happy. Nobody's find that. Most people said, yeah, let us know what you do, but this is a nightmare. We don't want to touch it. We sort of avoid it. It's a no-win sort of situation, right? And so the issue here, to kind of break it down, is many of us of a certain age remember playing in the street. And we would there basketball go on the sidewalk and we'd play, and you'd move when cars would come, and this, that, and the other. But nobody necessarily, if you sat there and said, do you think it's a good idea for children to be playing where cars are driving through, says, well, that's probably not the best thing, but it happens, we do it, whatever. The other part of it, I think, is this issue with basketball goals. Again, if you have children and they play a lot of basketball, you're probably empathetic to it. As you get older and your kids move out of the house, you become maybe a little more curmudgeonly, and those kids walking. I think the other, frankly, goes to how this sort of impacts you. Are kids, is the goal up against the curb? Are kids very polite and watching and moving out of the way quickly and kind of waving at you pass, right? And, move your trash can in when you're not at home. Or are you sitting there literally stopped, and they're going to finish their game, right, before they let you pass, kind of a deal. And is the stuff out in the middle of the street, this, that, and the other. And I think that's the challenge. And so just to be clear, when council dealt with this 10 or so years ago, what the current code said is no person shall place any unsafe obstruction upon any street. It was very broadly worded. There's judgment call as to whether this thing created an unsafe condition. So what it allowed for is, if it was a problem, we felt it was unsafe, we had a code to deal with it, but we didn't have to deal with everybody. It didn't say you can't put a basketball goal on the street, otherwise it's a problem. And so that was the issue. And I think what TSAC wanted, and I say this because of what they approved, is a little more clarity. And so what PD proposed, they think is workable and that TSAC recommended, is basketball goals are allowed in the street, abutted against the curb line, right? You got to have it over on the curb, you can't have it further out. Only if the width of the street is 38 feet or less, right? And if it's a cul-de-sac, we're taking the neck of the street going into it, right? And the speed limit is 20 miles an hour or less. So it sort of gives us that flexibility, but we're not taking out the other section, right? The other part will stay there, so we still need to deal with the other unsafe stuff in the street. So this, frankly, is a compromise that gives a little more clarity to it, right? And really, one of the big things is, if speed limit's not 20 miles an hour, if it's more than that, you shouldn't be putting a basketball goal probably and playing in the street, right? Shouldn't. But again, I grew up in a city with 30 miles an hour speed limit on our residential streets, and we were doing all sorts of stuff out in the street. Tackle football, kick the can, you guys remember that? Spud, basketball. Yep, well, yeah, we did have that. My wife got hit by a car one time playing in the street as a kid too. So yeah, yeah. So that's the basketball goal. We think it's a good compromise. Like I said, PD did a lot of research, credit to AJ. Nobody's got a good answer to this. We think it gives a little more clarity in it, but it means you're not up here with 50 parents going, my kid can't play basketball in the street, right? I have to move the goal to in the driveway now, and that means all the cars are in the street. Now I got those problems and this, that, and the other. So I think it's a good compromise. This is one that comes in. TSAC recommended approval of it per what PD came up with. Okay. The other thing we added is a vulnerable road user provision. And again, we I think went with something that pretty much is common sense, right? This isn't some extreme thing of you've got to be sitting behind a bicyclist for an hour and can't get within 50 feet of them. The way we've worded it, again, we think is pretty common sense. It includes safe passing, right? It includes not harassing. It includes exercising due care. It's the stuff that when we talk about what we like about Schertz, treat other people the way we think it's a practical, pragmatic. And again, the section on bicycles also restricts what cyclists can do, right? I mean, again, if everybody's being respectful, it works well, but when you got a big group of cyclists and they're taking up, riding 4 abreast, you can't get around, our code won't let them do that. So we think it's a good balance there. And you'll see the language when we run the ordinance. A couple things we did is eliminate the section on the photographic traffic enforcement based on changes in state law. As I said, we updated the section on bicycles and play vehicles. We more clearly outline the process of installing and removing speed humps in kind of neighborhoods. And then again, one thing that probably is going to get more work, and you may recall we had talked about this a while back, a few years ago when we were having some things kind of go on, is moving events, those marches, those processions, those things like that, just so that we've got a permit process so that when people want to do stuff that's going to impede the flow of traffic or create a potential, there's a permit process to go through to make sure it's done correctly. And again, it's the kind of thing that often we do, or we'll get calls on from some of the church groups that want to do a run where they stay on the sidewalk, but it's a big group, so they're all going to be kind of crossing the road at one time, and we send somebody out with PD to make sure it works okay. When we used to do the Will and Check walk on Schertz Parkway, we would have kind of required it of ourselves. And so the idea is to come up with something so that we've got something there that's reasonable, that lets us deal with it, avoid problems, kind of going forward. Sort of a situation. But we anticipate bringing this back in a couple of meetings from you, depending on how long staff takes to do that kind of final review. We'll get it cleaned up and looking nice with everything. But just wanted to kind of tell you this is on the horizon, it's coming. Again, I understand devil's in the details, but just because it's a big thing that we've been working on a while, wanted to have kind of given you a heads up. But happy to answer questions about where we're headed or what we're thinking or something that you want us to look at.
Councilmember Hayward.
With the basketball goals, how is that going to affect some of the HOAs? Because some of them don't allow basketball goals in the street, period. Is that because typically those can be an issue and people get little nasty grams from their HOAs?
Yeah, so
Will
let me
this
let
change?
Dan kind of chime in. I don't know, because I'm not as clear on what the HOA can regulate with regard to what's in the city street. But again, with regard to our normal regulations, if an HOA says you can't put a pool in your backyard, even though the city code would allow you to put a pool in your backyard, then it's your HOA's thing to deal with you on that, right? And just because the HOA says you can put a pool in the backyard, if you can't meet the city requirements, you can't put a pool in your backyard. So HOA is going to deal with you on what you can and can't do, and that may or may not match with the city. But if the only alternative to that is we impose as a regulation the most restrictive HOA regulation on the entire city, and then we would have people going, well, I bought a house not in an HOA,
Right.
you know, because I didn't want to have to deal with that sort of stuff. So you're inherently going to have that, I think.
And then the last question, when you say the permit for, I guess, moving events. So an HOA wants to put on a parade, they have to come in and get a permit
Yeah, if an HOA says, we're going to do this parade.
in their neighborhood?
We're going to go down. The goal would be, and so like, they say, hey, we want to do a Veterans Day parade or a 4th of July, a lot of neighborhoods do that. That's a fairly straightforward thing. We'd make sure the process is fairly simple. Look at which streets they want to go. Do you need an officer out there to block traffic, right? We're not going to make it overly cumbersome in those situations, right? But if we have a group of people that says, we want to march up and down Schertz Parkway and it'll create some traffic issues, we want to have them gone through that permit process to make sure that we can all do it safely.
The only thing I would add with regard to HOAs is when they make a conscious decision to dedicate their streets to the public, so they don't want to maintain them as private streets, then they're going to be subject to the city regulations with regard to the use of the street. If they want to keep them private, then they can control the streets.
I figured that was a question because I just know some HOAs that give people a hard time now with their basketball goals. That's why I asked.
One question on the fees, number 7. Will you include that, what the fees are going to be when you bring that up to council? On page, slide 7.
Oh.
Yeah, just include the fees with
Oh, we will. Yeah, that would be one that we'll walk you through the proposed fee schedule
Yeah.
with and everything.
And depending on, I guess there's going to be different types of marches. You have the Christmas light parade where there's vehicles and you, like you said, there's 5Ks going up the parkway on just.
Yeah, like BVYA, the opening day baseball, right? They come out of Buffalo at
Yeah.
Clemens. They make that little turn and they're on the section of Schertz Parkway for 30 feet, and they turn in kind of thing. I mean, that's real different than whatever. And so, while there'll be a fairly nominal fee to apply for the permit, I think part of what will go into this is when they need officers and the cost of having officers out there directing traffic, things like that.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Westbrook.
Yep, when it comes to the basketball goal.
Yes, sir.
Maybe, just maybe, can you add in there, maybe it should not impede first responder, like put it in front of a fire hydrant? Can you imagine a basketball goal near a fire hydrant and then, you run it over and then there's a fire? I'm just sort of saying.
Yeah, so if you will, let me do this. I'll go back and I'll shoot an email out to fire and EMS and whatnot and see if they think that's an issue. But yeah, that fair enough. I think what we can probably put in is some generic language is what I think they're going to say, as not create sight distance issues, not block fire hydrants, things like that. Leave it a little more open-ended. But yeah, we can.
Thank you.
Any other comments? All right, thank you, Mr. James. All right, we'll move on. Okay, council, any possible updates or information requested from staff? Seeing none, we'll move on. Council, any possible items you'd like to place on the future agenda? Right, announcements by council members. Mayor Pro Tem Gibson?
I had the opportunity to attend the Adobo Showdown at the Schertz Civic Center. That was powered by the Filipino American Chamber of Commerce of Texas. They did an amazing job. The food was wonderful, and making sure that folks make it out next year. I also attended the Chamber Luncheon. It was a great informational dialogue that was shared by Lieutenant General Brian Robinson, who is the commander of the Air Education and Training Command of JBSA Randolph. And he was talking about how they're going to be replacing their aircraft, which we knew, but what all that's going to bring also to our city. So it's really good to hear from him directly. Thank you.
Councilmember Davis.
Nothing tonight, sir.
Councilmember Watson.
Nothing tonight.
Councilmember Macaluso.
Nothing, sir.
Councilmember Westbrook.
Nothing.
Councilmember Hayward.
Yes, I attended the TML TAMCC newly elected workshop. I emceed it and was able to explain to people what TML actually is and what their membership gets them. And so I think we're getting a new group of newly electeds that will probably take full advantage of their TML membership. I attended the Adobo Throwdown. It was amazing, and I got to actually help one of the chefs with preparing a meal, and it was delicious. And then I attended the city time at Retama Park, and we ended up getting rained out, but it was a good thing. And then the chamber luncheon today, and it was absolutely amazing.
Okay. Councilmember Brown.
Just the chamber lunch today, that's all.
Okay. The time is now 8:45. We stand adjourned.